Good afternoon, everyone. We'll call to order the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals, a regular meeting for July 24th, 2024. First item on our agenda is a determination of a quorum, and with 4 of the 5 members of the board present, we do have a quorum today. Next item is a public comment section. Was there anyone that reached out to the city staff to make comments before our meeting?
Ashley, have we had anything? No, Chair
Okay.
Young.
No one speaking before the meeting, so we'll move on to the consideration of our minutes from the regular meeting from June 26, 2024. Those were provided to the board members. Are there any changes necessary to those?
No, sir.
Hearing none, those minutes will stand approved as written. Next, we'll move to new business. First special use permit request is application Z24031 by Ms. Davina Ikamwosa. Apologies, I messed up the pronunciation. She's requesting a special use permit in order to operate a group daycare home in a duplex zone for property located at 2537 Summit Court. Mr. Aguilera, if you'd review that application for us.
Yes, thank you, Chair Young. Our first item today here on our agenda for BZA is a special use permit request by Ms. Davina to operate a group daycare home at the property located at 2537 Summit Court. The board may recall this application, the applicant had previously submitted a special use permit request to the BZA earlier in March this year for a family daycare home and was conditionally approved by the BZA again by March with specific conditions. Having been approved by the Tennessee Department of Services in June, Ms. Davina now wishes to expand her business to care for up to 12 children and 3 part-time employees to help her operate her business. As conditioned by the BZA in March, should the applicant wish to hire additional employees and or increase the number of children, the applicant is required to come before the BZA to demonstrate compliance with the general standards of applicability as well as the general standards for group daycare home use. As you note on the staff report, we included a table for you just to kind of show what was approved by the BZA for the family daycare home and what is being proposed now with the group daycare home. And so, as stated in the applicant's attached letter in your agenda materials, other than the increase of the number of children and employees, there are no other requested modifications from the original approval in March. The applicant is committed to constructing the required improvements for the daycare use that were conditioned by the BZA. Similar to the previous request, no more than 2 employees will be on the premise at any one time except during shift changes, so she's going to continue to manage and organize her employee schedule, so there's going to be no more than 2 at that time in addition to herself. The applicant will reside in the subject dwelling unit. Neither of the other employees will live on the property or occupy either of the dwelling units. And similar to the previous request, no new utility connections or improvements to existing services are proposed with this request. I'm going to scroll down again to the site plan so you all can kind of see what Ms. Davina was proposing again. No other modifications are being requested other than the increase to the number of children being taken care of, as well as adding the additional employee. As we saw here back in March, this was the proposed improvements for this proposed special use permit. Davina will be keeping these the same. She will be not modifying the turnaround driveway. She is committed to making those improvements. But again, other than the increase in number of children and employees, it will still continue to be the same. For staff's analysis, again, as a reminder to the BZA, the purpose of a special use permit is to allow for the review of a use in a zoning district, which by the nature of the use and its potential intensity impact on the area is not a use allowed by right within that zoning district. A special use permit may be approved with special conditions to minimize any adverse effects and to ensure compatibility with the surrounding area. As noted in our staff report, staff recommended approval of the family daycare application because staff believed, based on the site plan that was submitted by Davina, crafted by Huddleston Steel Engineering, the proposed improvements and the information provided from the applicant, staff believed that there would be a lesser impact on the adjacent properties with only 7 children. After reviewing the criteria for group daycare home uses, this application appears to meet most of the criteria for the daycare group daycare home use, with the exception of the standards of general applicability 1 and 2. Permitting a group daycare home use with more than 7 children, an additional employee, and potentially more vehicles to the site, staff is unable to sufficiently determine what, if any, impacts there may be to adjacent property, the traffic conditions, and or the character of the neighborhood. These items will need further review and deliberation by the Board of Zoning Appeals to determine if the requested special use and evidence provided by the applicant meets those standards in question. For today's application, we did inform Davina that, since she has been working with the state, she's been working with the State Fire Marshal's office and those other entities to provide that documentation to you all so you can, again, form an official informed opinion for her request. And so those have been included in your agenda items. For our standard procedure for special use permits, per Section 9 of the zoning ordinance, again, the applicant is required to demonstrate compliance with the general standards of applicability and additional standards for group daycare home use. They are required to produce that evidence before this board and show, again, how they're going to comply with those additional standards. So in terms of the general standards of applicability, standard number 1, the proposed daycare home is internal to the site. The property is at the end of a cul-de-sac in a neighborhood that is in close proximity to 3 schools. The new driveway off Summit Court will be constructed for the drop-off and pickup of children. The driveway will create 3 additional parking spaces for the parents, while the part-time employees of the daycare will utilize the existing parking area in the back. As you can see here on the site plan, that again, they will continue to use this area in particular, this area specifically, as that was communicated and approved for the family daycare home. The applicant has stated that the circular driveway can also accommodate up to 4 additional parking spaces for the cars. The applicant will be upgrading the existing chain link fence to wood or vinyl to provide additional privacy and screening. However, again, as staff has noted, because of this increased number of children and employees, there may be some potential impacts to the properties, and we cannot sufficiently determine that, what those impacts, if any impacts may be, without first understanding how the family daycare use operates and is managed. The BZA should review and deliberate further on this application, the attached materials, and determine whether the proposed group daycare use meets the above standard. For general standard of applicability, standard number 2, the proposed group daycare home will not be making any changes to the exterior of the building, as it will continue to look like a residential duplex. This is consistent, again, with the family daycare home use that you all approved back in March. The applicant will be constructing a new driveway in the front yard to accommodate drop-off and pickup, and will be creating 3 parking spaces for the proposed use. However, again, staff notes, with the increased number of children and employees, staff believes the use will be more intense and may not be as compatible with the immediate vicinity due to the additional number of cars coming to the site and or potential future tenants to the other dwelling at 2539 Summit Court. Again, the BZA should review and deliberate further on the application, the attached materials and evidence that Ms. Davina has included with your agenda packet, and determine whether the proposed group daycare use meets the above standards. For the remaining standards, for the general standards of applicability for this proposed use, staff did not find any other immediate concerns. It meets there are no other significant historic, natural, scenic features located on this site. Ms. Davina will be removing a tree in the front yard to, of course, accommodate this circular drive. But beyond that, staff believes that the remaining standards of the general standards of applicability, she has met those. And the additional standards for group daycare home use, as mentioned previously, staff does note that she appears to meet those standards for the additional standards for group daycare home use. She will be constructing a new driveway to accommodate at least 3 parking spaces for the parents. As shown on the attached site plan, there appears to be sufficient space so people can come off of Summit Court, pull into the driveway, and pull out without having to back out onto Summit Court. So we believe she has met that standard. As a condition of approval, the applicant has obtained a statement from the Tennessee Department of Human Services that the daycare home can comply with all the requirements of the state of Tennessee. That, again, has been included in your agenda materials, and so she has satisfied that. Screening, that was the topic of discussion, again, with the family daycare home use. Again, Just like the family daycare home use, Ms. Davina will be committed to upgrading the chain link fence on the property to either wood or vinyl fencing to further provide screening and other types of measures to ensure that there's privacy between the other adjacent use for the children in the group daycare home. Required off-street parking shall be located on site. Again, that has been accommodated and has been addressed as a new front driveway in the front yard will be constructed for this proposed group daycare home. For staff's recommendation, staff has reviewed the application and believes that the proposed use has addressed the additional standards for a group daycare home use per Section 9, with the exceptions of the standards of a general applicability 1 and 2. Again, if the BZA decides to approve the application, staff recommends that any approval of the special use permit be made subject to the following conditions of approval and any additional conditions that the BZA may determine to be necessary to meet the general standards of applicability or the specific use standards, that they can do so, that they can impose those conditions. I am here if you have any questions. We have prepared and, again, compiled all the documentation Ms. Davina has gotten from the state as well as State Fire Marshal's Office to show, again, she has met those. Ms. Davina, as well as she is here in the audience, should you have any questions for her on any potential impacts that she is going to be mitigating with this proposed use. Thank you.
I just want to note there's a couple of inconsistencies in the application. First, the letter that she's written says that there will be 4 employees, but our overview shows that there will only be 3 employees. Can you address that?
So that was one thing that we confirmed with her. It's going to be her and 3 other employees. So in total of 4 people operating the business.
Okay. And then also in the state permit, it says the hours of operation are 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. And our previous approval was from 6:30 to 7. Is there any reason that we need to be in compliance with this state?
So that was at the recommendation of staff, and this is actually pretty consistent with other group daycare home uses. We have, typically with daycares, drop-off is around 6:30 or 7 o'clock. That is depending on how it is. We always encourage and or recommend to the applicant to consider maybe making it earlier, just so if they're doing preparations with their employees, getting the business, getting the daycare ready for that, they're allowed to, because as you all may know, if they are in violation of their conditions of approval, they are issued a violation. And so just to kind of correct that, we ask, maybe to consider just giving yourself a little bit more allotment time. So if parents do drop off, you're protected from that, and it allows you to continue to operate in compliance with our standards as well as the standards of the state.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood this.
Thank you for pointing those out.
So she hasn't acted on the approval from earlier this year. She got approval for the family daycare home, but none of the driveway improvements or fence or nothing like that. She hasn't operated under that.
No, sir, she has not. Ms. Davina had been going through the process of the state. She got approval to go up to 12. This is kind of why she's back here again, because before she acts on constructing that, making those improvements, she first wanted to see if the state has allowed me to operate with 12 kids in here. I want to make sure that I can maybe do that before I can make those improvements to the
What sort of criteria is the state looking at if they were going to take her from 7 to 12, or do they? Or
That's a good question, Chair, and that's one of the things that staff wanted to contact the state on to look at and understand, because truthfully, these are 2 separate entities. We have local ordinance, and then you have the state and their ordinance. And talking with Ms. Spearman, she's one of the representatives. She's a program specialist with the State Department of Human Services. Ms. Spearman communicated to us that they're looking at the square footage of the inside of the dwelling unit. They're looking at safety measures, sanitation, all those kind of things. They are not looking at land use. They are not looking at zoning. It is something that is part of the process, that it's even stated in the documentation that their approval does not override land use or zoning, at the local level. And so, but they are only looking at the inside of the dwelling unit. They are looking at sanitation, square footage for each child, those kind of measures. And Ms. Davina has gone through that process, so she can kind of elaborate on that further as to what the state is looking at. But from my understanding, that's what Ms. Spearman and all that the state is looking at.
okay. Any further questions for Mr. Aguilar?
Yeah, I do have one. So I know we have approved, actually, this application with 7 kids. Joel, do you have any idea of the number of applications, and this is a far-fetched question, but that we've approved that have 12?
Yes, sir. So I did some research for this, just in case those kind of questions came up. So we have had, in the last 20 years or so, we've had about 3. The last one was in 2016 off of Marymount Drive, had an RS10 zoning, had 12 kids, was from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., created 2 additional parking spaces with additional paved areas for turnaround. They had one other additional employee in addition to the owner. Before that, it was 2009 on Shelley Street, RS10 zoning, 12 kids, 6:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., had created a turnaround driveway on the north side of the driveway, which created an additional 4 total parking spaces. That one did not have any other additional employees. It was just the owner of the dwelling that she was just going to be doing that. The other one before that was on Hawkins Avenue, RS8 zoning, 12 kids, 8:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., created a bump out to create 2 additional parking spaces. Staff believed it was not sufficient, made a condition 8 of that letter, that the driveway should be widened for staff to make the final determination that it was sufficient prior to opening. That proposed group daycare home use had 1 other additional employee in addition to the owner. So we have seen these before. It's not very frequent we do, which is why we wanted to make our case to the BZA and as well as inform Ms. Davina that this is a unique case. As you saw, this is an RD, this is a duplex, this is zoned RD. This has 2 dwelling units on it. We believe that with 7 children, in the circular driveway, it could accommodate any potential impacts because it was a low amount of traffic, low amount of vehicles, only 7 children, and only had 2 employees. We've approved of others before in the past, but those were with a single family dwelling unit. It only had 1 family dwelling unit. It did not have an additional tenant connected to it. Now, we did not study further into those, what the site plan and what other kind of accommodations were made. We didn't look at the streets or any other types of measures, but we looked at what those conditions of approval were, and they have been approved before previously in the past for up to 12 children, but there were substantial upgrades that needed to be made per the ordinance and per the board's determination to ensure that there was not going to be any kind of impacts made to adjacent properties. And so that's kind of why we've made our opinion to this board that in terms of general standards of applicability 1 and 2, I think there was just the level of hesitancy with an increased number of children. We know with 7 children, again, in this circular driveway, there could be some, with these improvements, there could be some of these impacts that could be mitigated because it'd just be of lesser impact. But with the 12 and this being RD dwelling, RD zoning with the duplex, it's just some things that I think we're just going to just some more information that was required, which is why, again, staff requested Davina produce this information to show that she has been reviewed by the state. She has the site plan. She's going to be continuing to make those improvements that were approved of her and come before you all on that.
Have we ever approved 3 employees?
From the ones that I have seen, there appears to be at least a minimum of 2, the owner and maybe 1 other additional employee, but not 3.
You made a comment about the fact that this is an RD zone, a duplex, and that there's effect 2 dwelling units, and that kind of, I think I read through what you were saying, that's a concern when, in this particular situation, the applicant is going to be residing or resides in 1 of those units. So in effect, it's still back, in a sense, it has 2 units, but it has 1 that's dedicated toward daycare, and then the applicant lives on the other side, which is not necessarily a bad idea, but.
So Ms. Davina, so 2537, Ms. Davina will be living there, and the daycare use will be operating there as well. 2539 will be the one where they will have the additional tenants.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I just want to make sure that was, so, but Mr. Tips, that is something to note of, and that's why staff, again, communicated, we cannot control how many tenants she will be having in that. And she may have 1 tenant with 1 car right now. In the future, she may have a family of 3. And that's just one of the things that we communicated to her that we are kind of making her aware and want to make aware of to this board, that those are just some of the potential impacts that may happen in the future.
Thanks for bringing that back up, because I misunderstood that.
So this site plan that we're seeing is for the entire building and not just her unit.
So this site plan, yes, is for the entire property. But as you may recall, Ms. King, this is just, really, this proposed use is for her side of the dwelling unit, 2537.
But that Circle Drive will also have to be able to be accessible to the other.
So Ms. Davina has said in her letter and her attachments that she will not let the tenants park in the front. It is to be managed and only used for the proposed daycare use.
Well, how are they going to get into the property if they don't use the circular drive?
This rear area, they have another access off
Okay.
Oakland Drive.
Is that open?
Okay.
Yes, that is open today.
It is?
This is open. When staff came to inspect the property, this is how we got on the property. They have an access
Okay.
off of Oakland Drive, existing gravel driveway.
So there is no current access in the cul-de-sac. That is what is being developed.
That is what is being improved upon
Okay.
for this
I-
request.
That was probably told to us in the previous application. I just didn't remember, but.
Any further questions for Mr. Aguilera currently?
Is there enough room for the tenants to park, or are they going to have to park singularly in that quote-unquote driveway to the right?
So in some of the photos, and I'm going to also leave that up to Ms. Davina when she comes to speak if you can have comments, but when I went to inspect the property, the site plan doesn't show this correctly. I almost want to pull up GIS, but you can see that the gravel driveway is pretty substantial. It's not really approved upon, but it is pretty substantial, and there's a little carport that's over here where people can park underneath, as well as additional parking in the back.
Okay.
So there is area for it.
And the employees would also park in the front or the back?
In the back. They would park in the back on the side of Ms. Davina. This gravel area that you're seeing on this site plan, they would park in this area.
So the employees and the tenant would be sharing parking area?
The tenants for this unit on this side here, they would park on this side. Ms. Davina's dwelling unit, her side, she will be parking over here, as well as her additional employees will be parking on this side. And that was conditioned with the first approval that the tenants not use the front parking and only park in the rear, as well as the employees.
Okay.
Approximately, how much area is fenced in for the playground for 12 kids?
I don't know the specific, they have shown it on the site plan here. You can see that area. It is a pretty significant area. I'm not sure the exact square footage or anything like that, Mr. Tips, but I do know that it is pretty substantial. And again, they will be upgrading it. She will be upgrading it to be wooden or vinyl fencing, but it is a pretty significant area.
Any further questions? Thank you, Joel. Ms. Davina, would you like to come up and provide us any comments or clarifications?
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Did you have any questions for me?
I don't.
Do we have anything we'd like to ask her? This is your opportunity to provide any clarification, I guess, if the
Yeah, so when you all were talking about the backyard and the parking area for the employees, on the right-hand side, there are 2 carports that are located there for parking. So it takes 2 cars on the right-hand side. And then on the left-hand side, you can see where it says covered area. That also has 2 parking spots. And then on the side, you can see there's, am I doing this correctly? Yeah, so this is also a parking spot as well. So I would be able to park here, another car would be able to park alongside me, and then another car. So that's for the employees. I do plan on having part-time employees because I believe something was stated about employees, and I don't know if you all knew it was whether they were full-time or part-time. So I do want to make that reference. And the reason why I'm having an additional employee, because I have to take in consideration that my employees may need time off. They also have personal lives. They may need vacation time. So for that, I can't, I can't require somebody to come in every single day and not assume that they will need personal time. So that's the reason why I asked for 3 employees, because I think Joel stated with the other people that have been approved in the past, it's only been them and 1 other employee. I'm not sure if that employee works 365 days, but as with anybody, we all owe it to ourselves to have personal time. So that's the reason for the additional employee.
So there'll only be 2 people, 2 staff people there at any given time?
Yes, sir. What I saw in the documentation as far as the state, when you have 12 children, you have to have a certain number of people actually watching those children depending on the age range. Because I'm keeping children between the ages of 2 and 5, I need to at least have 1 person there and then, 2 people on site. So that's the reason why I'm having the 2 people, and then, like I said, the additional employees is if someone needs to take off.
Do you envision you and 2 other employees
That is
when
correct.
you're in operation?
Yes, because I actually live in the unit, so I'll be there, and then there'll be 2. Yes, sir.
I thought that was what was already approved, was you plus 2 more employees.
Right, but now that I'm having more children, I would need, if someone needs time off, then, it's not going to just be me. I'll have another person to have the backup for the additional person. Does that make sense?
So Ms. King, so Davina's right. So you all approved for 7 kids as well as 2 additional part-time employees. So now what she's requesting is 12 kids and now 3 part-time employees, because as she said, now whatever her own scheduling, her own management staff wanted her to indicate clearly that she actually was going to be having an additional employee a part of this business. And that traffic pattern may impact it or not. It can be dependent on how she wants to manage it, but it is actually an increase of the number of employees a part of this proposed special use.
Do we have any indication in the current, as approved, whether there's whether we're requiring it to only be her and 1 other employee on site at a time?
So for our last previous approval, when you all looked at the family daycare home use, it just said that, that it should care for no more than 7 children, the hours of operation. Family daycare shall have no more than 2 employees employed at the family daycare home use in addition to the owner, Ms. Davina. So
Okay.
that's kind of why, again, we wanted her to be clear. If you're going to have that 3rd one, that is something to bring before this board so they can.
But what I'm hearing is that you don't intend to have more than 2 employees, or you and one additional employee there at any given time, except for changing shifts.
Yes, there should be only me and 1 additional, it should be 2, because I believe if it's 12 children, you have to have it has to be enough number. So, of course, I'm going to help along, but I'm more so the director. So, of course, I have to handle other things besides just watching the children. So I have to make sure there's 2 people there at any given time for the children.
So with the increase to 12 children, you also will have you and 2 employees on site, as opposed to what the prior application was, where you would anticipate having 7 children and just you and 1 employee
That is correct.
on site.
To make
Okay.
sure I'm meeting state recommendations.
Understand.
Thank you. Anything else you'd like to add, or any further questions for?
Oh, I know there was one additional thing that was stated. I think and I think Joe cleared this up, when you all asked had I started any of the process, I actually had already had the tree removed, and at that point in time, I had spoken with Joel, and it was stated that it may be best if I completed all my inspections prior to, starting construction, because I was moving forward with construction, and I wasn't aware that there were other inspections. But as he stated, I did pass all the inspections with the state as far as the child care, with the fire department, the state fire department, also with the local city fire as well, and then the state environmental inspection. So those have all now been passed. So if you all allow me, then I will continue construction. So that was the only reason why construction stopped.
Any further questions?
No, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. If there's anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you'd come forward and give us your name and address, and you can provide us any comments you may have. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and open the floor for any further discussion or a motion.
Was this advertised at all?
Yes, it was. There was, I believe it was.
Well, I mean, like a new sign put up that there was going to be another public hearing so that the neighbors have any idea that this application has changed?
I believe so. I believe Eddie Smotherman, our zoning inspector, dropped off those signs. I'm not sure of the date of it, but I believe those were, every new request, since this is a new request,
Right.
new signs would have to be placed outside. But staff did not, I'm not aware of any phone calls that we got, nor did I.
Yeah, and then we followed our typical notice procedure on the item. I haven't received any phone calls either.
I'll make a comment or two. I guess I share the city's hesitancy with this piece of property, with the tenants and what sort of cars and traffic they may have, along with going up to 12. So while I think Ms. Davina's got her ducks in a row and really run a good business, I think going to that amount of traffic and potential impact of this cul-de-sac here is probably more than I'd be comfortable with. So that's kind of where I am with the.
I likewise, this, at least, on the one hand, it's on a cul-de-sac, it's at the end of the street, there's not that many houses on this street. Its proximity to Oakland High School and also to Pittard and the Oakland Middle are, I can understand that, and access in there to it. And it looks like a lot of this may be rental property for whatever that may be. It's having that extra, as you say, it looks like she's got a good plan in a lot of ways, but having that unit with tenants adjacent to it adds a little more than I feel comfortable with. But other than that, I mean, I think that she's put together a good plan in a lot of ways. It's just given some of our requirements, particularly in that area, I'm not convinced that we should move forward with it.
I kind of feel the same way. You could make an argument, is it compatible with the immediate vicinity? Well, we've already approved the daycare key piece with 7 kids, so it's hard to make an argument that since you've already approved it in that fashion. But 12 kids with 12, unless they're brothers and sisters, trips during the morning here, and so there's not that many houses. That, to me, that's even more impact that they're going to see, the coming and going. I just think it's a stretch. We have a tough time with in-home businesses with respects to being in neighborhoods, and I just think this is a reach with respects to the number of trips and the fact that you've got 12 kids and the vehicles and their parents coming in and out of here on a pretty much a daily basis, except for on the weekends.
Well, and you're also increasing we're adding potentially five vehicles into the movement on this property. And I don't blame anyone for asking. You don't get anything if you don't ask for it. Because it sounds like you've made plans about employees and making sure that you have people that are fresh so that they can take care of these children, and it makes sense to want another person to work with these kids. But at the same time, when we think about the broader impact to the neighborhood, increasing the traffic in this into a home by potentially five vehicles is a lot. And so I share the concerns of my colleagues.
I would like to address some of the concerns. So I think you stated 5 vehicles. As far as employees, there will never be more than 3 vehicles on the property at most at one time. And I have 3 sufficient parking spaces dedicated. And as I stated with shift change, there's one person leaving, there's another person coming. I think someone also stated something about time. As Joel stated, I am currently positioned with 3 schools. There's John Pitter that is directly across the street. So at any given time when students are getting ready to be released, there are cars that will line up. There's Oakland High School that's in the back of the yard. So at any given time, there are cars that occupy both sides waiting for pickup. And that actually is along the street. And then diagonally, there's Oakland Middle. There's not normally a problem because they're kind of diagonally, they're diagonally positioned across. All of my parking will be on my premises. With the addition of the 5 kids, the parents are coming in at different times. Normally before school starts, and because my business closes up at 5:30, it's going to be after school ends. With the 7 parking spots that I have, even though there's an addition of 5 additional children, there is still ample amount of parking, and it doesn't affect me or my neighbors. I think something else was stated about renters. If that is an issue, believe me, I have no problem with not renting because I really don't want to be honest. But if that is an issue, and there needs to be something written up about the maximum number of tenants or people that occupy the unit, I have no problem with doing that as well. So I think I've covered, something of what everyone else stated. But yes, there's more than enough parking for everyone. It does not impact my immediate neighbors, and yeah, it still complies with everything that was previously approved.
Not speaking for her, but I think if you take the potential that you would have 2 cars that your tenants would occupy, you have a vehicle, you would have at least 2 others, that would be your 5. And then also, with respect to Oakland, the back entrance to your property.
Yes, sir.
Is across the street from Oakland where you've got traffic. I don't know exactly when you state you're open, but I don't know exactly when they're doing their school starts there and also at Pittard and how that impacts it too. So, that actually contributes even more traffic aside from what your traffic would be.
Yes, sir. And I was going to say, just to, I guess, piggyback off of what you're saying, currently, even if I had tenants there, most tenants have at least 2 cars, could be a third. But then also, I have mine, so it's already normally 4 cars that are normally there. So at this point, I understand 1 additional car, but there is still enough parking. But that has not been a problem in the last 7 years that I've occupied the unit. And that hasn't been a problem with any of the schools or my neighbors stating that we are utilizing their land or we are causing problems as far as traffic with entering. If anything, they most of the time block us because they're waiting on their children. But, we're used to it because we decided to live there.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Is there any further discussion or a motion of some sort?
I can't move to approve it, so I guess somebody's going to have to get off the dime and move to reject the application, and I guess I will make that motion.
I'll second it.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If you would, call the roll for us.
Ms. King,
Aye.
Approve, I to the motion, yes.
Mr. Tips,
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton,
Aye.
Chair Young.
Aye. Thank you, appreciate everybody's time on that one. Next, we'll move to our next application, Z23034 by Clyde Roundtree of Huddleston Steel on behalf of Veterans Plaza has been withdrawn, is that correct?
Yes, Chair Young, that's correct.
All right. So next, we'll move to application Z24033.
Chair, if you don't mind, before we proceed. So Matthew just let me know, staff actually missed putting the signs out this month. We just wanted to let you know that it occurred. We didn't have Eddie go out and get those signs placed.
That was inadvertent, and we apologize for that. The signs for the administrative appeal, however, stayed up from last month, but all other applications on the agenda did not have signs posted. Our apologies for that.
None of these applications had a sign in there posted? Is that?
With the exception of the administrative appeal. Those signs, because it was originally on the agenda for last month, those signs stayed up from last month and were not taken down.
I guess I would revert to you guys and attorneys if that's what sort of effect that has on us.
Were letters sent?
Yes, I worked with Ashley and we made those notifications.
But the property, the sign that goes on the property itself was not placed.
Correct, with the exception of the administrative appeal.
I'm not sure what change that has for us, whether it's allows us to proceed or not. I guess that's why there's two forms of notification, the sign and the mailing, whether one or the other
I
catches.
can't recall how much is required.
Yeah.
Does the mailing go to the owner of the property?
So,
Because that could be a different address.
do you know, did you include the owners this month, Ashley?
It's the owners and the current occupant.
So, yeah.
The owners and what?
And the
occupant.
current occupants.
And a
We
parameter.
cross-reference the address, the mailing address with the property address to, and if it's different, we send it to the current occupant so
Okay.
that if it's a rental, the tenant will get it as well as the owner of the property.
Next.
Yeah, but do we need to go proceed, or do you need to recess to figure out whether this affects our next application? 5-minute recess. Sure. Sure. We'll adjourn for 5 minutes.
whether that was required before we can.
This doesn't really anything with regard to the last,
The big one, yeah.
the previous item.
Well, if there's,
If I wasn't on this board, I would see those signs.
Wouldn't that help? That'd be-
All right, appreciate everybody's patience. We'll call the meeting back to order. Guess you'd like to update us on the last item?
Yes, Chair Young. Regarding the placing of signs, there's a couple of rules in play here. If you look, specifically since we're talking about special use permits, if you look in that section of the zoning ordinance, there are multiple layers of notice that are to be provided to the public, and I'll read this off, so indulge me a couple of minutes here. It says, written notice of such public hearing that we're having today shall be published in a newspaper of general circulation in this community. In addition, a sign shall be posted and maintained on the subject property by the applicant, which conforms to the size and content requirements of the BZA, and notice shall be mailed to property owners within 250 feet. Failure to mail notice to such owners will not invalidate the special use permit. Couple of points there. Even though the rule says the applicant, planning has informed me it's been their standard practice when they talk with the applicants that we have signs that we will put out on the applicant's behalf. So in this situation, it would have been the city undertaking that responsibility. There's also a provision in the BZA rules of procedure regarding notices. Says staff should be responsible for giving notices required by state and/or local law, and it shall be presumed that such notice has been given unless a specific objection to the legal adequacy of the notice is raised at the outset of a public hearing. So taking these two provisions in tandem, I believe it's basically up to the board, if an objection is raised, to decide if notice was adequate to the public in a given circumstance. Of course, now that we have notice on the record that signage was not posted, I think the board has to look at the totality of the circumstances and decide were the other layers of notice adequate, or does it rise to the level of an objection that one of the three methods of notice was not provided. And I'll also make note that I tried to very quickly research the state law, and it appears that there's not any other state requirement that signage be posted. We're looking at just at general notice. So I think if you look at, do you look at constitutional protections? Was notice provided? Yes, notice was provided in the sense of the newspaper publication and mailings to residents. Like I said, I think now the board has to look at does the failure to post signage, is that something that can be waived as a technicality since other notice was provided, or is that something that's going to rise to the level of an objection from somebody on the board?
Okay. So we plan on three different methods, typically. The sign in the yard, the Murfreesboro Post, is that the newspaper that
I believe so,
goes?
yes.
And then the mailings to 250 feet or 250, what's the diameter around a property?
250 feet
Okay.
is the rule.
And so the newspaper and the 250 feet, we know we're done. It was just the sign in the yard.
Yes, sir.
It's a tricky one to know which method notifies the most people. I don't know, have a strong feeling whether it's rises to the level of put the brakes on or not.
And I will say too, if the board does decide to move forward with either the item that was just voted on or any of the items that are forthcoming, the remedy for an inadequate notice is that the decision is voided and you have to revote.
Go through another process of notifying everybody, basically a
Yes,
deferral.
yes. New round of publication, make sure the signage gets put out at that point, and then comes back to you for a fresh inquiry.
I hate to be the one to make that call. I mean, like, what does, if we're Matthew's belt and suspenders approach, giving everybody every opportunity to make sure they're handled correctly, it makes me wonder if that's makes sense. But that's thinking out loud versus a direction.
I will note too, I don't know that this provides a decision for the board one way or the other, but the beginning of that, of the rule in the zoning ordinance says not more than 45 days after an application for a special use permit is filed, the BZA shall hold a public hearing thereon. So you kind of run against, I guess, a little bit of a rub there as far as having something considered in that 45-day window, along with, the proper notice requirements. So I think like I said, I think if the board decides to move forward with these today, I think there's a reasonable argument that the constitutional requirement of notice has been met, even if the letter of the rule was not complied with. And like I said, if there's an objection raised from somebody who didn't have notice afterwards, the cure for that is to renotice and rehear. Or the board could perhaps decide to hold the public hearing today to comply with the 45-day rule, and then defer it for a renotice and rehearing. Or the board could defer.
But I'm hearing you say anyone could object if they so chose, if we did vote on it today, and by that objection, whoever makes the objection, then we would be obligated to have another public hearing and re-vote on it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay. Then with that, I mean, I don't know if we're going to go with motions here or we're just discussing it, but if that's the case, I feel comfortable moving forward. Because if somebody has an objection, then, and no matter what their connection is with the application, if just by making that objection, we got to hear it again, I'm willing to move forward with this process.
How would they hear that or make an objection, I guess? Are they going to be notified again, or just happen to see this on TV? Or, I mean, I agree, and if it's, I guess it's a approval or denial either way, whichever happens going forward, that somebody wanted to challenge it, does it start it over?
Can you read that one more time?
Sure. Would you like the zoning ordinance rule or the rule of procedure?
The zoning ordinance rule.
Yes, and I'll read subsection 2 of this rule from its entirety so you can hear the whole thing this time.
Okay.
Not more than 45 days after an application for a special use permit is filed, the BZA shall hold a public hearing thereon. Written notice of such public hearing shall be published in a newspaper of general circulation in this community. In addition, a sign shall be posted and maintained on the subject property by the applicant which conforms to the size and content requirements of the BZA, and notice shall be mailed to property owners within 250 feet. Failure to mail notice to such owners will not invalidate the special use permit. The BZA may approve, disapprove, or approve subject to conditions after deliberations of the proposed special use application. The BZA may take the matter under advisement or defer decision until the next regular meeting or special called meeting.
Why does it say that failure to mail notice will not invalidate the decision, but it doesn't say that for the other two types of posting?
Can I take the easy way out and say I didn't write it?
I know. That's my concern. I lean on an abundance of caution. I always do. And in that way, it would make me less but at the same time, I hear what Mr. Halliburton is saying, and that people will have the opportunity to make an objection, and we could always hear it again without really hurting anything, but it's oddly written. That's very strange.
Wow.
That one form of service will not be.
Yeah, I'll have to go back on what I said. I wasn't thinking that through. I would agree with Mr. Young's comments. There's no way for them to know.
Yeah.
That's the whole purpose of this conversation.
Yeah.
So if we do it, then, and they didn't have the opportunity to know about it, then that disingenuine, we're not allowing them to bring up the objection if they don't know about it.
They don't, because, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, with respect to the action we just took, I feel in that situation, there was adequate exposure from the fact that we just had an application that, even though it was for the 7 as opposed to the 12 child group daycare, that there was exposure, and I think the signs were out there. Is really these other issues, I have a little discomfort because I don't think it, if that's an issue there, then maybe we do need to defer, but I'll go with the majority with the will of the board.
Like I said, we have three methods to let residents know what's going on. I guess the reason for 3 is redundancy. So, I just didn't want to plow ahead and staff say, hey, we need all 3, but I can, they had opportunities to hear about it. Now, what's the most dominant way for residents to hear about it? I don't know. I don't know if the signs helps or mailers, the direct mailer you think would be one that would get attention, but that's just a guess on my part.
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, based on what we've heard from our legal counsel and the opportunity they've had, I think we should probably have a motion on how we're going to proceed instead of sitting here and continuing to debate it back and forth, I guess.
I'm hearing from legal staff that you're not seeing a hard stop, that, hey, we can't proceed because, number one, we got the public hearing requirement, and there's other methods for interpreting it correctly.
Yes, yeah, I think you have a few paths forward here. I think you could put a hard stop to the proceedings if that was the will of the board. I don't know that this is going to be legal advice, but that would probably be my least favorite of them. The second option would be to continue with the notice that has been given, to have the public hearings and to vote on the matters today. And then if there's an objection, then we can either, like I said, restart the process, or if that objection results in litigation, then there is that risk of exposure. But like I said, the remedy for that is to renotice and rehear. Or you could do option 3, which would be sort of the hybrid approach where we have the public hearings today, because it looks like we have some members of the audience who are ready to speak on some of these matters. Perhaps hear them today, and then if at that point the board is not comfortable that notice was sufficiently provided in accordance with the rule, then we can defer under the rule to the next meeting each of those matters to have them renoticed and give anyone else the opportunity to come to the public hearing without requiring those who are here today to come back and readjust their schedules again.
I like number 3.
I move for number 3.
I second it.
To go ahead and proceed. And if there is a objection, we'll deal with it at that point in time. At least that treats the folks that are here that already knew about it with full fairness and openness. So.
Okay, and I think the proper way to proceed with that then will be to bring up each item in its normal course, have the public hearing on it, and then have a motion to defer each motion as we go until we get to the administrative appeal, which had the signs out, and then we can deal with it in its due course.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate everybody's patience while we work through
We
that.
need to vote on that.
We had to vote on that.
Is that okay, there's a motion and a second to hear applications and hold the public hearing, but then defer. Any further discussion on that motion? If you'd call the roll for us.
Ms. King,
Aye.
Mr. Tips,
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton,
Aye.
Chair Young.
Aye. All right, that motion's passed, so we'll proceed under those guidelines. And with that, we'll move to application Z24033 by Ms. Kristen Frenza, requesting a special use permit in order to operate a family daycare home in a single-family residential RS-12 zone and this is for property located at 2918 Roellen Road. If you'd review this for us, Mr. Donovan.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair Young. So as you stated, this is an application to operate a family daycare home, in a single-family residential district at 2918 Roellen Road. So the family daycare home is permitted as a special use in the RS-12 zoning district. There's a typo there. I apologize for that. But it requires a special use permit before this body. So attached to the staff report were the agenda materials for the proposed daycare home. As stated in there, only the first floor will be used for the family daycare home of the single-family residence with no proposed modifications to that dwelling unit itself. There are some on-site modifications that we'll discuss. So the property is zoned RS-12 with no overlays. The subject property is within the Brentmead residential subdivision and borders Brookshire Estates to the east. Both of those subdivisions are zoned RS-12. So the applicant's letter proposed, as I already stated, the first floor of the dwelling be used for the family home daycare. And in your agenda packet, there's a floor plan that the applicant provided that shows how that first floor is going to be used on the site. There's one bedroom that's going to be exclusively used for the daycare as a playroom and as the primary room within the structure that'll be used. The dining room and kitchen on site will be used at meal times and for meal preparation, with the master bedroom being used as a nursery for infants, and the living room used for other indoor activities. And then the children of the family home daycare will have access to the bathroom that's on the first floor as well. They also have access to the backyard that currently has an existing privacy fence. The applicant mentioned in the letter that they'll be adding a secondary fencing area that'll be used for the outdoor play area when they're outdoor for those activities. The applicant intends to be the sole employee for the daycare, and no new utility improvements will be provided to the site. It's going to use all that's existing. The family home daycare will operate, and again, there's a typo, I apologize. According to the letter, it is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. And that's as noted in the letter. There will be 7 children on site. The applicant is expecting 1 to 2 vehicles for morning drop-offs and afternoon pickups. She has instituted a contracted hours, which the way she explained that to us is there will be a window for the pickups and drop-offs to occur. If they're not within that window, they're going to have to wait to come back and get their children. There will also be penalties assessed according to the way she has agreements with her users. So there shouldn't be more than 2 families on site at a time or leaving simultaneously. So you shouldn't have more than 2 vehicles there on site. To meet the additional standards for family home daycare, the applicant provides to add 3 additional parking spots on the north side of the driveway. We'll get into this a little bit more, but this will allow for parking for the family home daycare. However, there is an issue where this could conflict with, staff believes this conflicts with one of the standards of applicability for family home daycare that states the site, you can't back out of the site onto the public street. Our zoning ordinance for situations where there is parking spaces that are 90 degree to what would be a drive aisle, which in this case the driveway is acting as that drive aisle. It requires 22 feet of width so that you can back out, make the turn-in movement, and pull forward into this case it would be to the city street. The existing driveway on site is 16 feet, so there is that 6-foot difference that it would be needed to get to that 22 foot of drive aisle. and meet the standard of applicability of not backing into the public right-of-way. So staff has reviewed the criteria in this application, and I believe it generally applies with the standards of general applicability. There's that lone exception that exists that where staff believes the item or the additional 6 feet is needed on the driveway to allow for those proper turn-in movements to be made to prevent backing out into the public right-of-way. So staff is currently recommending an indefinite deferral on this item. There's an existing codes violation that staff was made aware of during the review of this. There was a pool installed on site without a permit. It gets into a drainage easement. You know, the pool is there. We've had discussions with the applicant. The applicant has shown us a picture where the pool's actually been taken down, but we need to make sure the integrity of that drainage easement still exists. We haven't had a chance to get on site, send out our zoning inspector and public works inspector to verify that drainage easement has been returned to its natural state or is in a functioning order. You know, typically in the zoning ordinance, when there's an active violation on site, we wouldn't take an application in, but in this case, we found out after the application was made. And staff is recommending deferral based on that. Staff has included recommended conditions in the event you were to decide to approve it. And staff's recommended conditions are the special use permit for a family home daycare will allow for no more than 7 children. The hours of operation shall be from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and the family home daycare should not operate beyond those hours during the week and be closed on Saturday and Sunday. The family home daycare shall not only employ the owner in the family home daycare use. Should the applicant hire additional staff or increase the number of children enrolled in the daycare, the applicant shall amend the special use permit to be subject to the general standards as well as standards of a group daycare home use. All child loading and unloading shall be done on the property. No parking associated with the family daycare home use is permitted in the public right-of-way, and the applicant shall contact the City of Murfreesboro Building and Codes Department to obtain any required permits for new construction or remodeling and pass any necessary inspections. The applicant shall provide an updated plot plan that ensures adequate space according to the zoning ordinance for backing out of the proposed parking spaces and pulling into the public right-of-way. And the special use permit shall lapse upon sale or transfer of the property, or if the owner, Kristen Frenza, ceases to reside at 2918 Roe Ellen Road, and any zoning code or zoning violation are resolved prior to operation of the family daycare home commencing. And one item to note before the public hearing, I passed out an email that we received in regards to this item earlier this week.
I need to make out of an abundance of caution, I just realized my sister lives within 2 or 3 houses of this application, so I'm going to not participate in conversation or vote because of that fact.
All right, any further questions for staff at this point? Are there state permitting processes that apply to this?
There are, and she has provided, and it's in the agenda packet, that we have a letter from from Lynn Spearman, who Joel mentioned earlier. Joel actually originally was working this case. He reached out and confirmed that information did come from the state. So she is subject to those and working through that process, and
Okay.
they expect to be able to approve her.
All right, any further questions for Mr. Donovan?
And I did fail to mention the applicant is here and can answer questions as well.
I guess, Ms. Frenzy, if you'd like to come to the podium and provide us any comments you'd like to add to this one?
Hello.
How are you?
Good, how are you? I'm a little nervous. I wanted to read this letter that I wrote regarding the pool situation. My name is Kristen Frenza. I am the owner of 2918 Rowan Road. My family and I recently relocated from Massachusetts in May, and we're not fully aware of the local regulations regarding pool installation. When initially requested to remove the pool, no additional requirements were mentioned to me. It was only this morning that I was informed of the need for further yard work. I have since complied with the pool removal request and have engaged a landscaper to address the necessary yard work. I would like to note that we did not receive a formal violation notice. I contacted the Building and Codes Department this morning, and they confirmed that there is no violation on file. Furthermore, I have submitted an application for a pool permit to ensure all future actions adhere to the proper procedures. Currently, I'm responsible for babysitting 4 children at my home, which is legal in Tennessee. Any more than 4 children, you need to have a daycare license. To attend this meeting, I've taken time off from my duties and incurred a loss of wages. Given these circumstances, I respectfully request that my hearing proceed as originally scheduled. I am willing to comply with any additional conditions regarding the grading of the backyard. Thank you for your consideration and understanding. So originally, we had talked about if this gets approved, that it will be approved with conditions regarding the driveway. And I'm hoping that if it gets approved, we can approve it with conditions for the driveway and having the backyard graded rather than deferring it and having to come back. I was a licensed provider for 6 years in Massachusetts, and I noticed there are very, very few licensed daycares in Murfreesboro, and there are tons and tons of wait lists for daycare centers because of that, because there's not enough daycares here. I have a wait list of children waiting to enroll that need daycare, so I hope you consider my application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have any questions for me?
Any questions for the applicant?
Yes, and thank you for your presentation. You indicated in the application you also had 3 children at home,
Yes, I have 3 sons,
and their ages are
16, 12, and 8.
16, 12, and 8. Okay.
Yeah, and they will be in school come August, and they are home in the summer and during school vacations.
Well, I guess really my main reason for asking that was their ages, because how many more children would that have you supervising in addition to the 7?
Yeah, no, well, according to Department of Human Services, my kids don't count in my daycare numbers.
Yeah.
So I'm allowed to have up to 7 kids, which I plan on probably only having 6, as that's how many I had in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
But yeah, they won't count in those numbers, and they're all old enough and independent, so,
Yeah. Okay.
okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Is there anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? If you'd come forward.
I'm Valerie Hanna. I live at 322 Trenton Court, which is right across the street, kind of diagonally across there. I don't mind for them to have a daycare. I just don't want it to be a business where there's a sign and there's a big horseshoe driveway. It's just too much. I love my neighbors, I love my neighborhood, and I just really don't want that to become our neighborhood, because that's really, if the business comes in, that's like the decline of your neighborhood. It starts a snowball effect, and then our property value goes down. And I mean, we've lived there for 26 years. So we've seen all these houses being built and our neighbors that come in. And a lot of our neighbors have been there over 20 years. So they're like family. And I just don't want it to turn into something that's bad. No signs, no nothing like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's finish.
Hi.
My name is Jill Morrow. I live at 319 Trenton Court, directly across the street from them. So they're on Roellen and I'm on Trenton, but our driveways are actually on that picture almost across the street from each other. And I think she already watches kids, so up to like 4 in her house right now. I guess I don't understand why it needs to increase to 7 and then possibly increase to 12 one day. Like Valerie was saying, it's a neighborhood, and that's what we want to keep it at, is a neighborhood, not a business. We don't want businesses in our neighborhood. I've lived there for 25 years. I certainly don't want a business coming into our neighborhood. People retire into our neighborhood. And like I said, we just don't want a business there. I certainly don't want her front yard to become a parking lot with added concrete there that doesn't look like a yard. It looks like a big slab of concrete. That Roellen is a busy street, a lot of traffic there. You know, it's a thoroughfare, it's a cut through from our neighborhood into Crown Point, out onto DeJarnette, that goes on out of the neighborhood. It can be a lot of traffic, and safety is a concern. I have a lot of concerns, so thank you.
Hang on just a second. Let's see, anybody else wishing to speak? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and we'll give you a brief response if you'd like. You've had your chance, but you can give us a couple of quick comments
I didn't know if I could
you'd
address
like.
the concerns.
You can,
Okay.
briefly if you don't mind.
So like Richard stated, I only plan to have 2 drop-offs at a time or 2 pickups at a time. When I was a licensed provider in Massachusetts, I was very mindful of the neighbors because I agree. I wouldn't want to live in a neighborhood with a big, a busy business. And I don't want it to be like that, but unfortunately, in order to have more than 4 children, which is what I need to survive income-wise, I have to get licensed. And in order to get licensed, I have to appear in front of the board to open the daycare. So like I said, I'm only going to have 2 cars at a time, and I have the privacy fence, so there won't be any issues there. I don't want to be that person in the neighborhood. I am very, very mindful of that. And doing it for 6 years in Massachusetts, I had no complaints from the neighbors, nothing like that. I followed all the regulations and rules, so I just wanted to add that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion? Or as we mentioned after our adjournment, just to make sure that notice is given to everybody, our plan was to defer action to give others that may want to speak their opportunity to do so. That way we can try to give every application the attention it deserves. Is there any further discussion before?
Well, I think regarding this particular situation, since staff also has requested a deferral, I don't know if our plan was to just move it to next month, and if we were going to defer this one anyway, and staff's asking for to do so, I think it would be best to defer this one until such time as staff has had the opportunity to view, and that way you wouldn't be coming back 3 times instead of coming back to I think you said, and I don't know how you referred to that deferral.
Yeah, and so I refer to it as an indefinite referral. What we would look for there is just when the code, the violation's been remedied, to be able to get back on the agenda. That could be as quick as next month. Matthew did mention that, this would be at the discretion of the board. We could also discuss a special called meeting to handle these a little earlier versus waiting until next month. But that's at the discretion of the board. We'd have to have a quorum to do that for it to make sense for us.
Well, for the record, I have a concern with this application partly that's been addressed as far as the pool and the violation on that part, but that's secondary in my mind. In this particular situation, there is quite a bit of activity along those streets. This site's got limited access, and right with all that traffic, I would be concerned about approving the application. But since we are going to defer it, I'll just leave it at that.
Actually, we need a motion for deferrals at them.
I'll move until, to defer until staff can review the site.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second. Is that given the direction correctly?
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll bring that back when the code's violation has been remedied after we've got our inspectors out there to look at it at whatever meeting that turns out to be, whether it's a special or a regular meeting.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. If you'd call the roll for us.
Ms. King,
Aye.
Mr. Tips,
Aye.
Chair Young.
Aye. All right, the motion to defer has been approved. I appreciate everybody's patience on that. Next, we'll move to application 24032 by Mr. Matt Taylor of SEC, representing Fellowship Bible Church of Rutherford County. They're requesting an amendment to an existing special use permit for an existing institutional group assembly use to continue the use of an 8,190 square foot temporary modular building for an additional 2 years by a private school, grades kindergarten through 12, this in conjunction with the existing church in an RS-15 zone located at 4236 Veterans Parkway. Mr. Aguilera, if you'd review this for us.
Thank you, Chair Young. So this next item we have on our agenda is a special use permit request to amend an existing special use permit for an existing institutional group assembly use to continue the use of a temporary modular building for an additional 2 years for the private school Redeemer Classical Academy. I fold up the site plan so just kind of you all can remember again just kind of what's existing on site, what you all approved of back in 2022. The subject property is located at 4236 Veterans Parkway. And just a reminder again, the surrounding land uses are single family, multifamily residential to the south and east and vacant commercial to the north. As the board may recall, Redeemer Academy had acquired property for their permanent school campus located along Old Salem Road. However, the construction of the new school was delayed due to construction costs. Redeemer submitted a new special use permit in February 2019, requesting an extension for their time at the modulars, at that time at Bethel Community Church, to expire July 31st of 2022. Redeemer then relocated to the 4236 Veterans Parkway, where Fellowship Bible Church then assumed responsibility for the management and removal of the modulars in 2 years, July 31st of 2024 this year, as approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals in June of 2022. Remember, they all came before you. SEC submitted this type of application to show you where the location of the modulars and those types of improvements that they would be making. Redeemer had acquired property in Rutherford County, and the old property inside the city limits is now under contract for purchase and under the consideration for rezoning to construct a single-family residential subdivision. Redeemer has a site plan approved with Rutherford County and are currently working through the permitting at the state and local level for their new site. So as stated again, for the background of this, they came before you all in 2022 to this site so they could have their special use permit request so that it would expire in July 31st of 2024 this year. Again, the purpose for this extension is to ensure that they have adequate time for there to get their approvals with Rutherford County at the state and local level. As I said in this background, their property currently in the city limits right now is up for rezoning and rezoning to permit the development of a single-family residential subdivision that is along Old Salem Road. I will leave Matt Taylor to kind of explain their whole process with their permitting with the Rutherford County and the state to kind of explain where they're at. But again, that is why they're here today, to extend, to amend their special use permit so they can permit an extension of their special use permit to August of 31st, 2026. As you can see in your staff report, staff has confirmed with the applicant and Redeemer that the only requested change with the special use, again, is the extension of the special use permit. So the expiration date will be by additional 2 years. As shown on the site plan that SEC has prepared, the temporary modular building will remain in the same location as it was approved by the BZA back in 2022. Will be located on the side of the building away from public rights of way. The square footage of the modular building will remain the same. Again, that has not changed. It will be 8,000. It will continue to be 8,190 total square feet. The hours of operation will also remain the same. That has not changed. It will be Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. or the bell time of 8 a.m. To 5 p.m. with the bell time of 3 o'clock. Again, that has not changed from the 2022 approval. The student population will continue to also be the same. It has not changed. 85 total students will continue to be there, plus an additional teachers and staff and administration will also be continuing to, those personnel will also be on the property. The staging or queuing of school traffic will continue to be the same, and the queuing and school traffic will continue to be prohibited off of Jack Bryan's Drive located here. That was something that, again, was communicated with the original approval back in 2022, and again, that has not changed. They will continue to honor that. There is no change to on-site parking. Additionally, the landscaping installed between the buildings will continue to remain as approved by the BZA. In accordance with our standards for special use permit per Section 9, the applicant is required to provide evidence demonstrating their compliance with the standards of general applicability, as well as the additional standards for institutional group assembly. I'm going to their letter right now so you could see as well. Matt Taylor of SEC has provided that documentation, and they will be compliant with those general standards of applicability. Since there is no change to the modular building, its location, and really, again, the only change is to the extension date, they will continue to ensure that they are compliant with those general standards of applicability, and so staff agrees that they are continuing to comply with those standards. For the additional standards of applicability, the additional standards for institutional group uses, staff believes that those standards have been met before. As before. They had no change in parking, no change to on-site circulation. They will be, of course, still meeting the parking regulations for the institutional group assembly use. So since there is no modification to the parking, no modification with on-site circulation, or really anything beyond to the landscaping and no new permanent lighting, staff believes that this proposed amendment to the special use permit still complies with the additional standards for institutional group assembly use. In staff's analysis of this application, staff believes that the applicant has demonstrated that the requested use meets the general standards of applicability, as well as the additional standards for institutional group assembly use for the RS-15 zoning district. Staff recommends approval of the special use permit to allow the temporary modular building and the operation of a private school on the subject property, subject to the following conditions of approval. One, that the special use permit shall allow the use of a temporary modular building to be used for a private school, Redeemer Academy School, grades K through 12. Two, that the modular building shall not exceed 8,190 square feet and shall be installed at the south side of the building, consistent with the site plan that was approved in 2022 and consistent with the site plan shown today. Three, that the modular building shall be removed no later than August 31st of 2026. Four, that the maximum number of students shall be enrolled at the school is 85. If the school desires to have a greater number of students, then it must apply to the BZA to amend the special use permit. A traffic study will be required at that time, again, should they want to increase the student population. 5, that the days and hours of operation for the school shall be limited to Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. or a bell time of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., bell time at 3 p.m., and shall not conflict with the church services or large events. 6, that the applicant shall continue to maintain the landscape between the buildings and in front of the modulars as previously conditioned by the Board of Zoning Appeals. And then 7, no staging or queuing of school traffic will be allowed on Jack Bryan's Drive. Again, those conditions are mainly, again, similar to what was approved back in 2022. The only real significant change to this, these conditions of approval, is really the extension of the date for the continuation of these temporary modular buildings. I am here if you have any questions. Matt Taylor of SEC is here as well. I'm going to go back to the site plan so you again can review that. But should you have any questions regarding their site plan and their process with Rutherford County, Matt Taylor of SEC will be able to answer any of those questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Aguilera at this point?
Why do they need 2 years? Just because of where they are in the process?
Just because where they are in the process, and talking with the Redeemer and talking with Matt Taylor, it just sounds like through this process right now, getting approvals, still having to construct everything, this will allow them to ensure that they're not going to be butting up against that extension deadline of, August 31st of 2025 or August 31st of another date. But I'll leave Matt to explain that if there's any questions.
Yeah, so, Mr. Taylor, what do you think the realistic timeline is for construction completion?
We really want to be done by, we want to be in the new spot this time next year, but, we also thought we were going to be at our new spot already. And so we, are just building in that buffer just in case. But they have the new land. As Mr. Aguilera said, their existing land is under contract. So all those things, and they have scaled back the first phase of what we're going to do inside the county. And so we're cutting costs, we're raising funds, and frankly, it's a little cheaper to develop in the county than it is the city, just the way it works. And so we're trying to get all things to come together, but they really want to be in their new facility this time next year.
Okay.
Any further questions for Matt?
No, sir.
Thanks, sir. This time we'll conduct a public hearing. Is there anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? If you'd come forward and provide us any comments you may have. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and open the floor for any further discussion. And again, I guess as a measure of caution, we'll defer, subject to the notice process, to make sure we get everything buttoned up.
Just for the record, again, just because this has happened during the recess, you all have been provided a letter from Fellowship showing that they have continued their support for Redeemer to be on that property. And so, just for the record, again, that was provided to the members of the board today for your review by Mr. Monty.
When are they supposed to remove that at this point under the old application?
Under the old application, they were supposed to remove it by July 31st of 2024.
Okay, and if we defer a vote at this time, what would that do to their?
That's a good question. I think I'm going to defer to Mr. Hankins over here.
I like to complicate it.
It's a good question.
I think we could consider, since there's a permit or a request in process, that the prior approval and its expiration would be stayed pending the decision of this request, so that they could keep it there. And then if we approve it going forward, then it stays on for the extra 2 years. And then if not, it would expire as of the date of the rejection of the new request.
Okay, that was what I was hoping for.
That's what we'll go with.
With that, I'll make a motion, we defer.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? If you'd call the roll for us.
Ms. King,
Aye.
Mr. Tips,
Aye.
Chair Young,
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton.
Aye.
All right. Thanks, everyone, on that application. Next, we'll move an administrative appeal. Application Z24024 by Sean Henry, representing AutoZone. They're appealing the decision of the zoning administration regarding whether a proposed use at 810 Northwest Broad Street constitute distribution of automobile parts and components and warehousing, transporting, distributing, which is not permitted in the commercial highway CH zone. If you'd go over this application for us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Young and members of the board. I will be introducing this appeal for your consideration. And after my initial comments, the City Planning Director, Ben Newman, will come up to provide some additional details and to further explain the decision-making process and the information that went into the Planning Department's ultimate decision that's the subject of this appeal. I just handed Mr. Hankins a copy of the Planning Department's file, which is required to be provided to you as part of this appeal process for your consideration. Now, this appeal relates to a proposed use by AutoZone to build what it calls a mega hub in the Jackson Heights Commercial Center, which is located at the corner of Broad Street and Medical Center Parkway. Most of this location is zoned as commercial highway, with a portion of the building being located in the Gateway Design Overlay, specifically GDO 4. AutoZone defines a mega hub in its investor communications as a store with substantially more unique products than a standard store, which, quote, provides coverage to both surrounding stores and other hub stores multiple times a day or on an overnight basis, end quote. The determination on which this appeal is based began when AutoZone submitted a building permit earlier this year. That triggered an administrative review process, which included the Planning Department. The Planning Department then spent substantial time emailing, calling, and personally meeting with representatives from AutoZone to better understand AutoZone's intended use for this location. I'll go more into those details shortly, but ultimately the Planning Department determined that AutoZone's intended use is primarily properly categorized as under the zoning ordinance as 1, warehousing, transportation/distribution, and 2, distribution of automobile parts and components. Either of those uses are only permitted in the industrial zoning districts and are not permitted in the commercial highway district. The planning director sent a letter to AutoZone on April 30th, 2024, informing it of his determination and inviting AutoZone to consider locating this mega hub in a more appropriate area. Now, Director Newman will be able to provide some more detail regarding the facts on which his decision is based, but there are a few points that I'd like to first highlight for your consideration. AutoZone has informed the city that this mega hub will consist of approximately 5,000 square feet of retail and commercial sales space, with approximately 20,000 square feet of warehouse space, which is not accessible to customers. The zoning ordinance defines a warehouse as, quote, a building used primarily for the storage of goods and materials, end quote. This mega hub falls squarely in that definition, with 4 times the amount of square footage being devoted to the storage of inventory versus the small retail and commercial sales area. AutoZone clearly intends to use this building primarily for the storage of inventory. Now, AutoZone has argued in its appeal letter that its intended use should be accepted because it qualifies as an accessory structure or use. The zoning ordinance does provide that warehouses which are merely, quote, incidental and accessory to another use, end quote, are permitted. The ordinance further defines an accessory use as a use which must meet all of the following criteria. It must be subordinate to and serve a principal use, and it must be subordinate in both area, extent, and purpose to the principal use. Here, the warehouse component of the mega hub clearly predominates over the small retail area. It is not subordinate to the retail portion in either area, extent, nor purpose. Because the warehouse area predominates over the retail area, this mega hub cannot properly be considered a retail shop under the zoning ordinance. But additionally, the director's determination letter also states that AutoZone's intended use might fall within the distribution of automobile parts and components. Here, there is no exception in the zoning ordinance for an accessory use. The Planner's Dictionary, which is published by the American Planning Association and is frequently relied upon by planning staff, defines a distribution center as, quote, a use where goods are received and or stored for delivery to the ultimate customer at remote locations, end quote. AutoZone representatives initially informed planning staff that this mega hub will service approximately 20 other stores in our area. This is consistent with AutoZone's statements to its investors. As noted in the agenda, AutoZone, as a publicly traded company, is required by the United States Securities and Exchange Commission to file an annual report on Form 10-K. In its 2023 annual report to investors, AutoZone repeatedly makes clear that mega hubs are intended to deliver products to local stores, are used to stock local stores, and are used to increase AutoZone's ability to timely distribute products to its stores. At one point, when the planning staff began repeatedly asking for information regarding the number, type, and frequency of deliveries to and from this proposed mega hub, AutoZone personnel responded this would actually be a no-route mega hub, which they ultimately explained was a mega hub that does not make any scheduled deliveries to surrounding stores. This concept does not appear in any SEC filings that city staff have seen, including the Form 10Q quarterly report, which AutoZone filed 1 month ago with the SEC. Moreover, AutoZone's employee, who primarily communicated with the city throughout this process, and the person who signed AutoZone's original building permit application, is Philip Pecord. When city planning staff requested this information about deliveries to and from this mega hub for the third time, Mr. Pecord sent an internal email to others at AutoZone asking, apparently for the first time, what is a no-route mega hub? Evidently, not only were AutoZone's investors completely unaware of this new no-route mega hub concept, so too were its internal store development personnel. But regardless, AutoZone claims that this mega hub will not have any routed deliveries to other stores. However, several weeks after telling planning staff about this evidently new no-route mega hub concept, AutoZone representatives met with planning staff on April 16th. In that meeting, among other things, AutoZone representatives stated that while this mega hub might not have any routed deliveries to restock the shelves of surrounding stores, it would still serve an important part in delivering products to those stores. They advised that because this mega hub location will have multiple times the number of unique products compared to its regular stores, in total about 100,000 unique SKUs, whenever a customer goes to a surrounding store looking for a product that store does not stock, the employees of that store will be able to order that product to be delivered from the Murfreesboro Mega Hub to that store for pickup by the customer. AutoZone advised there will be approximately 8 to 10 trucks and vans used for this process. So while there may not be any formal delivery routes, the Mega Hubs will still be used for delivering products to these 20 surrounding stores. In other words, it will be used to distribute products to those stores. Now, in conclusion, the planning department is not opposed to AutoZone, and in fact welcomes a mega hub in the city. However, this is not the proper location for that mega hub. The Planning Commission and the City Council determined that this building is appropriately zoned Commercial Highway and GDO 4, based upon traffic flow, infrastructure, and public safety concerns, among others. In fact, in 2022, the Planning Commission considered an application to remove this precise building from the Gateway Design Overlay. After a hearing, the Planning Commission determined that the Gateway Design Overlay was placed here by the City Council for a reason and voted unanimously to keep it in place. A warehouse and distribution center such as this mega hub is not permitted at this location under our zoning ordinance and would have a significant impact on the surrounding streets and properties. For these reasons, city staff recommends that you vote to uphold the determination by the planning director that this proposed use is not permitted under the zoning ordinance at this location. Thank you, and with that, I'd like to ask that you permit the planning director, Ben Newman, to further discuss the factors that went into his decision.
Thank you, John. Chair Young, members of the Board of Zoning Appeals, thanks for having us here today. Ben Newman, Director of Land Management and Planning, and like to talk with you a little bit about what went into this decision, kind of how we look at things in planning, and the information we gathered from AutoZone, and then how we came to the conclusion that this really is more of a warehouse and distribution center, in addition to the retail that AutoZone would have there. So just briefly talking about what planning department does when we receive these types of requests. We receive types of requests from businesses, developers, looking at sites, telling us what they're doing, and we evaluate those. We look at maybe concept plans, site plans, and we're trying to get an idea of what a business is doing so that we can determine, is this use, is it applicable to this particularly zoned area? We have discussions with businesses to find out what they're doing. We look online, we look at what we see their other stores doing, and so that's all part of the process when we're trying to figure out and pinpoint what a use is. And sometimes uses are a little bit different. They might straddle some lines, and I think that that's what AutoZone may be doing here. But our goal in all of this is to try to help the applicant get to the end so that their project can be completed, and be completed in a zone that's appropriate for what their use actually is. And so I'll turn now to some of the things that we looked at in the planning department, some of the things that I looked at as the planning director to determine what the use of AutoZone is. So here, we had AutoZone come, they applied for a building permit first. I think they were just going to move into the building. And so they didn't come to the planning department to ask those questions that we generally get asked on a lot of things. And we don't get asked on every type of building permit, but a lot of them we do. And in this one, it came to us, and a typical AutoZone store is about 5,000 to 7,000 square feet. And so what piqued our interest here was this was about 23,000 to 25,000 square feet for what was listed as a AutoZone retail in the permit. So of course that piqued our interest. Planning department, members of planning staff got with AutoZone, asked questions, what's going on, give us an idea of what you're doing. And so from that, I'll go into the information that we gathered, a lot of it from AutoZone directly or from their annual report, things like that. So annual report was something that was, I think, important to look at. Emails between planning department staff and AutoZone were considered, discussions with other city staff, information gathered at a city AutoZone meeting that we had, a virtual meeting, April 16th, a site visit that city staff went to on a site that AutoZone had told us about that would operate similarly to the one they're wanting to do in Murfreesboro, and then of course just a review of the proposed site. So the annual report talked about, it's important. That's something that a company is telling its investors or potential investors, this is what we're doing, and this is what we will continue to do, and this is what we will do in the future. And there were a lot of things talking about hubs, mega hubs in that annual report. For example, page 9, paragraph 1, our hub stores, including mega hubs, which carry an even broader assortment, carry a larger assortment of products that are delivered to local satellite stores. And so that was, of course, initially the emails from AutoZone to us were talking about this this particular activity. Page 10, paragraph 2, they say that they ended fiscal year with so many hub stores, which have a larger assortment of products, as well as regular replenishment items that can be delivered to a store in its network within 24 hours. Hub stores are generally replenished from distribution centers multiple times per week. Hub stores have increased our ability to distribute products on a timely basis to many of our stores and to expand our product assortment. What was interesting here to me was the language that was used, and they use the term deliver and distribute really interchangeably, talking about delivering parts to stores and then distributing. And so I think they're using that interchangeably. I think we can safely do that as well. Page 17, the third heading, our ability to grow depends in part on new store openings, existing store remodels and expansions, and effective utilization of existing supply chain and hub network. So again, they're referring to this hub as a network. So think about distribution, hub and spoke type model, and that's what they're talking about here. Paragraph 18, or page 18, paragraph 1. In addition, we extensively utilize our hub network, our supply chain, and our logistics management techniques to efficiently stock our stores. So pulled out a lot of this language because they're telling their investors, they're telling their potential investors, they're telling the public, they use hubs, mega hubs to distribute to their local satellite stores, and they're going to continue to do that. On February 26th, looking at some of the emails that went back to AutoZone and Principal Planner Brad Barbie, one of the senior project managers for AutoZone said, this store is expected to service 20 stores in the area, which are currently served by the Mega Hub in Nashville. Now, I know we don't have 20 stores in Murfreesboro. We don't have anywhere close to that. But at that point, at least their representatives believe that they're going to be distributing from the Murfreesboro Hub store to other stores in the area. February 27th, Mr. Pecord from AutoZone states to Mr. Barbie that Murfreesboro site will have 2 doors on the sidewall, which will be used to send out products to satellite stores. So again, they're just confirming what their annual report says. And that's information that we are looking at to try to determine what their use is. And these are the things that we're seeing. Another email to Greg McKnight, March 27th, states that customers are not allowed to sort through parts. And I believe he's talking about in the warehouse area of the proposed AutoZone store, that the customers don't go back into that area to sort through parts. That's going to be left up to the hub personnel to do that. And I reviewed other emails, and they're similar in line to this, so I won't belabor the point and continue to go through those. On April 16th, representatives of AutoZone and city representatives met virtually to have a better discussion of it so that we could really continue to get a better understanding of what AutoZone was proposing to do. And that meeting was very helpful to us. We looked at maps of what AutoZone was looking at. They showed us their maps of stores in Nashville, how the hub worked, and you kind of have a hub store, and then you have other stores surrounding that, really like a hub and spoke type system where distribution from larger distribution stores come in to that hub, and then that hub will send out parts as needed to other stores. Some of those are routed on a regular schedule, and it was our understanding that some hub stores don't have a regular routed schedule, but they still make deliveries to the stores as needed. So if you have somebody at a store, a regular AutoZone store, and they're looking for a 1978 part of carburetor that they don't typically carry at a regular AutoZone store, that hub can have it, and they would ship it and distribute it over to that store so that that person could get it, and AutoZone could still remain sort of a one-stop shop. They wouldn't have to go to somewhere online or a competitor to get that part, that the hub store would have it with this increase in SKUs that they would have. And so, sounds great. One of the things that AutoZone told us in that meeting too, and I thought this was really telling, that they said this won't be a routed hub because we don't need that yet at this location. So that, I'm thinking of that qualification of what that statement means, and it's telling me that it may not be needed yet, but they plan to put it in place. They plan to have a routed hub there when it's needed. So that's telling me that they're telling us they're going to be distributing parts as needed as people buy those, but at some point they're looking at and planning to have a routed hub store here once that need presents itself. City staff inquired about other AutoZones that act similarly to this one, and AutoZone told us that yes, there's a store that will operate similar to the one we're proposing in Murfreesboro, and that's on Nolensville Pike in Nashville. So city staff went there, took a look at it, talked to one of the AutoZone team members there who was familiar with its operation, got a tour of that site. And so if you look at the pictures that are in front of you, the top picture there represents what we really think of as a retail space. And so you can see there that it has, it's lit up really well, has nice shiny floors. The aisles are fairly wide so that multiple people can pass through as they're looking for things. There are prices on the items there. You can see what the items are. They're not in boxes. They're out for everybody to see. And so that is your typical retail space. The next picture down shows where the point of sale takes place. So there's a couple of counters right here, and that's where the sales take place. Just behind the counter, you can see racks of parts, and you'll see those in a typical AutoZone area. That's where they warehouse the parts that aren't out on the retail space. So I think each AutoZone has a warehouse component. It's just typically smaller in size to what the typical retail space would be. And so those parts, they don't want the customers to go back and sort through themselves because they're smaller. They're just not set up for that retail shopping experience that you would have out on the retail floor. But at a typical store, that space is ancillary to the retail component. That warehouse part of a typical Amazon or AutoZone is ancillary to what the retail space is. One other thing to note in this picture is this black curtain. So as we took a tour of the hub there, the retail space is open to the public, but if you go through that black curtain there, that part is where the hub operation starts. And when we talked to the team member there, they really said, this is the retail area. Everything else you see back there is the hub operation. So it's really, in their mind, it's a separate operation from the retail space. I think there's commercial racking back there as well, and then the rest of the 20,000 some odd square feet were really dedicated to that hub operation. The next picture here is the hub operations center, and the desk there is where there were AutoZone team members that were working in that area. They were getting orders, pulling parts off of the warehousing shelves in there, and then putting those up for distribution to the other stores in the area. And you can see here, these racks are closer together. They're not like the retail area. They're much closer together, and they contain a lot of parts that are ready to be distributed to other areas. This next picture here shows more of the shelving and the boxes that are there. And as you can see, the boxes, it's not a retail space. They're boxed in nondescript boxes. You can't tell what parts are in there unless you have the SKU gun. It doesn't have pricing on them. Your retail people who are shopping are not going to go back in here to pull their own parts and to look for that. This looks like a warehouse. What you can see on the left side there is all of these are pallets here, and those pallets are returns from customers from, I don't know where, other stores, but those are the returns, and the team member there told us it could take them a full week to sort through those returns and put them back on the shelves. This is the commercial counter that's kind of in the side of the Nolensville Pike operation. And then this other picture here, this is the Nolensville Pike from the air looking down on it. It's about 34,000 square feet. And then this is the front of that Amazon hub store there, just to give you some reference of what that looks like. This picture is, as you can see, this is the Jackson Heights location. Has a storefront there, just to put you in reference of where it is. It's Toots, Liberty Square, and I believe there's, in this now is Scoopy's Ice Cream, H&R Block, a Thai restaurant, convenience store, and a chiropractor office. And that's, if you're looking at the front of it, that's the portion there that AutoZone would be going into. And I think there's some other, there's a couple of vacant spots in there as well. So Mr. Tolley stated that this is CH zoned. And CH has certain things that can go there. Warehousing just simply isn't one of those. Distribution isn't one of those. I think that AutoZone is claiming, well, we're really not doing distribution from this. We're not delivering any parts to other stores from this. I think they're going to be doing some commercial deliveries to some commercial customers that they have. So, you know, I don't think that that really changes the analysis here. This is still a warehouse. When you look at the floor plan, you can easily see the retail area. You can see the vast majority of the rest of it is warehouse. And, you know, we want to continue to help AutoZone get to the end. We think that what they're doing is good. They're a good corporate member of our population here. They do good things. And, you know, we want to continue to help them. We just want them to go in a location that is proper for their use. You know, we have industrial sites here that they can go into for warehousing and distribution, if that's what they're planning to do in the future as well, the distribution. And, you know, we'd like to help them get there. And I understand, too, why they may want to look at this place. You know, we get calls, a lot of calls. We get inquiries about this type of use in commercial areas. And what we hear is, you know, it's expensive to go out into the industrial parks to do warehousing and to do distribution for those sites. The leases are just more expensive. And so this area maybe isn't as expensive to go into, and that's why it's attractive for them. It's also, I think, it models up with that hub and spoke for their distribution model that they're looking at. So in conclusion, taking in all the information, a lot of information we received from AutoZone, a lot of information that we looked at in their annual report, and the emails, discussions, everything pointed to either warehousing and or distribution of these parts. And so for those reasons, you know, I determined that it's not compatible with the CH, and you know, that we still encourage AutoZone to look in the right spot for what they're trying to do. And there's no questions. I can hand it over to AutoZone. If you have any questions, be happy to answer those.
Thank you. Any questions for staff at this point?
Just one. Have we allowed any variances for warehouses in the commercial highway zone?
Not to my knowledge, but I've,
I wonder if it's even
Mr. Blomley may be able to.
abilities.
A use like that typically wouldn't be the sort of thing that a variance would be granted for, because the criteria for granting a variance, as you know, deals with exceptionally unusual natures of the property itself, its size, its topography, its shape, things like that. And most, you know, I never want to say never, but that is usually not the type of thing that would apply to any sort of use, be it commercial, industrial, anything like that. So it would be very, very rare and very highly unlikely that we would grant that type of a use variance.
And Mr. Hankins, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that use variances are expressly prohibited by our zoning ordinance.
I believe that's correct, yes.
What? Okay.
Yeah, so to allow a use that's not permitted in a certain zoning district, the proper method to go about having that use at that location would be the rezoning of the property as opposed to the variance process.
Is retail use permitted in industry?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. In general, yes, it is.
The fact that the GDO Ford touches part of this property, I guess it comes with a little more stringent design standards, but the commercial highway, that's the whole piece of property, is kind of it doesn't allow it, correct? So
Correct.
the fact that GDO Ford it touches a part of it is not really a determining factor, I guess.
That's correct. Yeah, it's the CH, the commercial highway zoning, is really the determinative factor here. It's just simply not allowed in Chart 1 in our zoning.
Okay. Any further questions from staff before we turn it over to AutoZone?
Did the determination that this was a warehouse as opposed to other retail made specifically on a number of amount of space between retail versus other use?
Well, In this case, it was our understanding that the retail component would be around just under 5,000 square feet, and that the other area would be, I think it was 19,000 some odd square feet.
What's the proportion in a typical AutoZone?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. But
Because if we determine those as ancillary warehouse use to the retail space, and their proportions are the same, what's the difference between this and what's the difference between having this and as opposed to a Walmart versus a super Walmart as we dealt with 20 years ago?
So the proportions that I was talking about is really just that front area. When I walked into the one on Nolensville Pike, there was a typical size, what it felt to me as a typical size of an AutoZone retail area, which is, I don't know if that's 2,000-3,000 square feet for just that area that you can walk around. And then there was some shelving immediately behind the point of sale that we were told, this goes with that retail area. And that was probably 5,000 to 6,000. It's hard for me to estimate. I didn't take a ruler out and measure those, but it was dwarfed in comparison to the rest of the building that was 20+ thousand square
But
feet.
if I walked into Nolensville and asked for a 78 carburetor and I wasn't a commercial person, would they be able to go into the hub portion and get it for me?
It's my understanding that a hub employee would pull that, scan it to pull it out of the hub, and then put it into the retail sales for that retail location.
So I'd be able to walk out of the shop with it as a retail customer in the
Yes.
Nolensville shop?
Yes, they
If I
pull it out.
walked into that building, I would have access to all of the retail, all of the inventory in that building.
You wouldn't have physical access to it, but the employees
Well, I don't have
would.
access to everything in a regular AutoZone.
That's right. That's right.
But
Yes.
I would be able to walk in, I wouldn't have to order it online, I could just walk into that shop like any other store, and they'd be able to go to the back and get me whatever I needed.
That's my understanding. They would go to that warehouse portion, pull the part, scan it, and then transfer it to the sales portion to then sell it to you.
So there's a lot of auto parts places around town, that most of those are in CH zones as well, right? This is really just a matter of the ratio of retail to warehouse, right?
That's correct. Yeah, the retail portion of it.
That's about 20%.
The retail portion of it is fine, but that's a smaller portion. And
Yeah,
the
I just
warehouse
want to say
portion is much larger, that's right.
According to this application, the retail portion is approximately 20%. And likewise, whether it's AutoZone or O'Reilly or whoever it might be, they're laid out a lot the same in that you have a area of retail, but then you go behind the curtain, or whatever you want to call it, and the salesperson is going to get it for you.
That's still considered retail in other shops that are smaller, correct? The other AutoZones and O'Reilly's in our community are considered retail, but they're smaller stores.
The area that people can walk through is the retail area, when you're looking at square footage. Now, when you're just looking at
I'm asking how
the
these other
sales,
stores have been considered, not the portions of them, but as a whole. Have they been considered retail with an auxiliary, or have they been considered warehouses?
Mr. Palmer.
Yeah, so I think I'll kind of dive into what our zoning ordinance says. So our zoning ordinance says that warehouses that are incidental and accessory to another use are permitted by right wherever such use is permitted. So if you have a warehouse that is accessory to a retail store, then that warehouse is permitted wherever that retail store is located. But it specifies that warehouses incidental and accessory to the permitted use are allowed by right wherever such other use is permitted. And as Mr. Newman stated earlier, there are criteria to what is classified as an accessory use, one of which is that the area of the accessory use shall be subordinate to the area of the principal use. So
Can you
That mean
tell me
smaller?
where is that in the ordinance?
the definition of accessory structure, or accessory use,
Where- Can you,
Section 2 of the zoning ordinance.
I guess I
So it states, I'll read the definition of accessory structure or use. An accessory structure or use is a structure or use which A, is subordinate to and serves a principal building or a principal use, B, is subordinate in area, extent, and purpose to the principal structure or principal use served, C, contributes to the comfort, convenience, or necessity of the occupants, business, or industry in the principal structure or principal use served, and D, is located on the same zoning lot as the principal structure or principal use served. So that's the definition of accessory structure or use. Specifically, B is subordinate in area, extent, and purpose to the principal structure or principal use served.
With subordinate, can you infer a strict size determination that a warehouse has got to be smaller, and
I think the
rough inference there?
yeah, in my opinion, the common interpretation of that would be subordinate to would be smaller than. So,
Right.
So, and then if you're wanting to reference the first item that I mentioned, it's endnote number 18 from chart 1.
So when we have other auto zones come in, or O'Reilly come in, those are considered a warehouse with incidental or accessory structure or use to retail?
If the
Is that
warehouse,
how is a typical auto zone labeled? What is a typical auto zone labeled? In not this one, but when a regular auto zone comes in, that's 5,000, that Mr. Newman said was 5,000 square feet, what would we label those as?
if the auto zone, and I have not delved into plans for past auto zones, so I don't know that I can just give you an answer to that question.
I just
would,
want to know what they're.
yeah, I would
what
say
we would
if the
qualify.
warehouse meets the criteria of being accessory to the principal use served, then it would be permitted with the retail use of the auto zone. And one of those criteria is that the area of the warehouse portion of the use is smaller than or subordinate to the principal use, which would be the retail, because the retail would be permitted in commercial highway, for example. So if the warehousing portion was less than the size of the retail portion, then that would be a warehouse accessory to a retail use.
Is it, and this is probably for all of y'all, is it safe to say that based on application, based on what your research of AutoZone's overall plans and stated objectives and other things, the primary use is a distribution warehouse and not a retail? Is that why we're here?
Yes. Yes. And I think even if you pull the distribution part out, it still operates as a warehouse, which would be its primary function at that point. And then that retail portion of it, the square footage retail, would be subordinate to the warehouse portion of it.
Because they've stated in their plans that they plan to use it for mega hub and warehousing, right?
Yes, well, and that's how it, it's the storage of parts.
Or it goes back to the fact that it's a percentage that the retail portion is so much smaller than the typical, is that?
Yes, I think there's really two different things that are happening. One is that it's a warehouse, and it's larger than the retail area for this commercial highway. So that's one. The other is, and it stems back to our initial conversations, that they had planned to use this as a distribution hub. And so when we were first looking at this, we thought, well, it's distribution, and we wanted to dig into it a little bit more. And, then I think maybe what they're doing they say, well, we're not really doing any distribution from this location. We're just going to be selling stuff in this store. We're not going to be shipping it out. So we started off hearing that they were going to be distributing, they were going to deliver parts to other stores and do that. We look at the annual report. Hubs are, it's very necessary for them to continue to grow, to have this hub distribution scheme. So that's where we originally were, but it's regardless, if they're not even doing the distribution, because it's a warehouse, it still does not fit within the commercial highway.
I mean, I go in, in different auto parts places. I've been in AutoZone, I've been in several others, and from the ones I've gone in, it's really about size. They're just boxes, just like. And with the background is in appraising, I see buildings that have utility. They can be used for that now, and they can be used for something else later, and it's not really a big deal. But in this situation, it sounds like, the most of the ones that we are talking about, we're familiar with, they're smaller, and the ratio is just not that big a difference. And because they treat it the same way, just like Ms. King said, I go in, I order, I pick it up and I walk out with it. It doesn't matter which part of the building it came from, I walk out with it. So I guess what I'm getting, and I'm trying to get my hands around this, what's the difference? And so I hear you say it's really about size and it's about intent.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's the size. And if you think about some of the big box stores, a Home Depot or a Lowe's where you walk in and it's very large footprint. All those aisles they're wide. Anybody can go in and pick their parts up, and we consider that retail.
Yeah, but I think this is more of an inventory control thing too, particularly with small items.
And that's what they told us.
Yeah, there's not 80,000 different models of wood.
There's a lot of different types of screws out there.
There are.
I mean, but you can, but I can't go in and know which light bulb that I need.
I couldn't even figure out which size wiper I needed for a particular truck. So, hey, what am I?
Have we reevaluated like Walmart since they've started doing personal shipments to homes and being more like a distribution center than a retail storefront? Since I can get Kroger Plus to deliver to my home, have we reevaluated Kroger stores to determine whether they're distribution centers or retail stores?
To my knowledge, we've not had complaints that they're in any type of zoning violation. So I can't say that we have looked into those.
Because, if I walk into Kroger, there's a significant portion of that that's dedicated to delivery and pickup now. Are we going to reevaluate all of those retail stores to determine whether or not they've become distribution centers in our commercial highway districts?
I'm not sure.
I guess who the customer being served, let's assume that this location has the current square footage is the same, there's 2,000 or 3,000 square feet to walk in and buy something, but the customer served, say I've got an AutoZone app for instance, and they're going to deliver it to me. Who they're going to distribute it to, is that thought of in the zoning ordinance, or is it apply that, obviously they've their stated intent is to supply other stores, so this is not really, maybe I think the case at hand, but would the zoning ordinance look at it differently if the square footage and the building layout's the same, but the end user is a customer that's either wants it delivered to their house or?
I'm sure that we'll grapple with those types of questions because there are hybrid types of distribution models that are out there. They're not the same that when our zoning was written that exist today. And so we look at those and we'll study those as we move forward.
Yeah, and to your point, Ms. King, we're currently working with some of the department stores right now with the outdoor storage that has grown into those opportunities. And so right now it's becoming a fire concern. It's also a safety concern with all the inventory outside in the drive aisles. So to your point, we are evaluating how the turn and how businesses are operating lines up with our suburban model of our zoning ordinance. So it's not that we're singling anybody out. Our current zoning ordinance is a suburban model set up on opportunities for how retail used to operate. And so when we looked at this, I also visited the Nolensville store as well, and set that up. And I'm also, Mr. Tibbs, I have a 1970 Carmen Ghia, so I stay in a lot of these stores as well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so I do understand the operation, and when I visit the Nolensville store, it did set up because of the ratio of the floor area and the difference in that. It did set up differently, as it's going to operate in a different manner than an actual retail store. Our thought was that we wanted to make sure we maintain the integrity of the ordinance at this point. And as like everything else, breweries, where they're located in the city of Murfreesboro, everything else, that we would continue to look at those and modify those. Home Depot, Kroger, those guys are going to be grandfathered in at this point because of the current ordinance that they were actually brought in under. And then we'll continue to modify those as we go. So we're not saying we don't like the use. We're just saying currently under what we have and what we're regulated by at this point, it doesn't fit within the ordinance right now. So that's really, Mr. Tibbs, what we're here today to say. Currently, what we have evaluated, what we've researched months and months of looking at this, because we do know that it is a gray area, and didn't want to just dismiss what AutoZone was bringing to the community, because we do want it. And so that's why we took so much time and 2 visits and looking at different ordinances, regulations to see how it fits and what's the best place for it as it relates to our current zoning ordinance. So
It just seems to me that we're going to have more and more companies that are going to move towards this model.
Absolutely.
Be based on online sales, but we don't want to lose the Target or the Walmart because there's more storage in the back for me to have the option to buy from online than for me to peruse in the front. And I seeing that model seems to be something that's coming.
Yeah.
But I see your point that currently we do not have an ordinance that supports that model.
To your point, when we spoke with AutoZone, the next planning commission meeting, we brought forth an amended definition so that we could clarify distribution warehousing, and we pulled it just because we didn't want to muddy the water that we were doing something that was backhanded against AutoZone, to be honest. So we understand that it needs to be cleared up, and we'll do that moving forward. We had an applicant 2 weeks later after we talked to AutoZone that just wanted to do the exact same thing in a commercial highway area. The other thing we understand is we have vacant big boxes in the city of Murfreesboro. It fits
that would fit these models.
It absolutely fits these models.
And allow for our consumers to still be able to peruse these areas,
and the black
even
boxes,
in a limited space.
Yeah, so we understand it. We understand all the economics of it, and unfortunately at this time it just doesn't fit. But not to say this isn't something, along with everything else we're working on in the city of Murfreesboro as we grow, to try to get it in line. So,
thank you for that
Thanks.
clarification.
To all of you, thank you.
Anything further for city before allow AutoZone the term? All right, thank you. Feel free to, Representative AutoZone, to provide us any information.
Good afternoon, everybody. We appreciate your time today. I'm Justin Sowers. I have the pleasure of leading all pre-construction activities for AutoZone development. Again, we appreciate you guys allowing us to listen to our appeal today. We came up from Memphis this morning, glad to be here. Look, our goal here today is very simple, right? We want to continue serving the retail needs of the motoring public in Murfreesboro like we've done since 1983 in this community. We've been continuously operating here for 41 years. When we're excited to continue to invest in the growth of Murfreesboro by expanding our own footprint as well. So we're a Tennessee-based company. We're proud to be so. And we want to be a good neighbor and a good business partner for you guys and for your community. So I'll be brief with my prepared remarks because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for discussion today with all of us. So, yeah, I'd love to. Is our presentation in this same?
On the next tab over.
Got it. Cool. So I think what I'm going to do here is just park out on slide 6 while I go through my prepared remarks, because that gives you a pretty good idea of just how our store is shopped. But look, our position here is that this proposed location is a retail store, just like all other 7,000 AutoZone stores that we have in the United States. To my knowledge, none of those are zoned anything other than retail when it comes to our store, regardless of the size, and we believe this one is exactly the same. Look, obviously, we weren't as clear in our communications with staff as we should have been in hindsight on how this store is going to operate and the layout. For that, I apologize, but we want to make sure that this board really understands and gets a good grasp of exactly what's going to take place within this retail box. So our internal definition of mega hub or hub, it's really used to describe the assortment of inventory and the size of the box, because obviously they are larger than your typical AutoZone store that everybody is familiar with. But in reality, the way that this particular store is going to be shopped is exactly the same as the other 4 AutoZone locations that we have within the city of Murfreesboro. It's the same as the 6 locations that we have within this county. All the 4 locations that we have in Murfreesboro are also zoned CH, because the exclusive point of sale for all of the merchandise in the store is within that store itself. That's our primary argument here. I mean, Ms. King, your assessment of how our store operates is exactly correct. There's no subset of inventory within that store or any AutoZone store that you can't walk into the front door, ask for that part at the front desk, pay for it right there, and walk out the door. That's consistent with this location as with every other AutoZone store that we have across the country. And, you know, we keep referencing the Nolensville Pike location. That's where we asked staff to visit. In hindsight, that could have been a little confusing, and we understand that because that store does have what we consider a hub operations center. What happens is that store delivers, it's a small fleet of vans, it delivers to the surrounding stores 3 times a day. But even that box is zoned retail because of the same exact principle that applies. There's no bifurcation of the space. All inventory within that store can be sold directly out the front door to any particular customer. There is a difference with the operations here and in Nolensville Pike because there will be no quote-unquote hub operations center in this box, nor will there be distribution to the surrounding stores on any kind of regular cadence like we do in Nolensville Pike. You know, for context, we've got 184 stores across the state of Tennessee. Only 8 of those boxes operate with that routed delivery model, but all 8 of those stores, as well as all 184 other stores, are all zoned retail by their respective jurisdictions as well. So, you know, since no one else has made the distinction that this particular store should be anything other than retail, we hold that same position. So, again, just to reiterate before I turn it over to Mr. Henry for his comments, the AutoZone store on Broad Street is simply a big store. That is how this store is intended to operate. That is how it's laid out. All of the inventory, all of the floor area, just less the restrooms and the break rooms, all the gross sales are dedicated directly to the end customer. There's no middleman, if you will. And there's no scheduled deliveries to the surrounding stores. There's no hub operations center planned for this box. There's no hub-specific staff planned for this particular box. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it is simply a big store, and that's our position here today. So with that being said, Mr. Henry, would you like to come up and give your comments before we get into discussion, please?
Thank you, Justin. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name's Sean Henry, 511 11th Avenue North in Nashville. I'm a land use attorney representing AutoZone. I don't typically operate slideshows while I'm speaking, but I'll give it my best shot here. The point that seems to be missing here is, where's the point of sale? Why would you drive out to an industrial park, to a warehouse, for the purpose of buying a spark plug, for the purpose of buying an air filter? You wouldn't do that because you want to go to a retail store and buy it so that the folks behind the counter can pull it from the shelf and give it to you so you can walk out and be close to your home. The idea of where the staff is headed in their interpretation is a slippery slope, very slippery. I haven't seen the proposed text amendment, but ultimately the proposed text amendment is the solution to clarifying what seems to be beguiling at the moment. But you can look at this first slide and see that there was a Western Auto store in business in this commercial shopping center back in the 1960s. We also have Ms. Cook here, who is the landlord property owner and can explain further about their ownership, and she'll speak when the public hearing is opened up, but she can give you some more insight on the historic occupancy of this space. And I want to mention what Western Auto was, because Western Auto, for those of us who some may forget, they're no longer in business. But I just printed this out today, and I'd like to circulate this for the record, if I may. I'm not sure who to hand this to for the record. Thank you. But this is this is just a quick description from Wikipedia. I've never used Wikipedia before. Western Auto was a specialty retail chain of stores that supplied automobile parts and accessories, operating approximately 1,200 stores across the United States. They were ultimately acquired by Advance Auto. You now see Advance Auto frequently here in Middle Tennessee. And that's who occupied this space. So we're not introducing a use to this property that has never been there before. Western Auto was there originally. The second slide indicates the kinds of retailers that are operating in this store as of November of last year. There may have been some recent changes since then, but the range of users, including folks like Goodyear. Now think about your visit to a Goodyear tire store. You go into a small space for the point of sale to figure out what it is you're going to pay for and what you're going to have them do. Yes, it's service, but it's also retail. The tires are there at the store. Are the tires in an accessory building, an accessory warehouse, on the site, back of the store, nearby on the same parcel? Maybe. Doesn't really matter to you. The purpose is you're there at the Goodyear store, and there was a Goodyear on the site historically. You're there to get your let's just talk about tires, to get your tires installed. But where you are as a customer is confined to a small space. It's just because someone's working on the car is no different than an AutoZone employee going back and pulling the part from the back of the store and bringing it out forward to you. There's really no difference in distinction, or to the extent there is a difference, it's really a distinction without a difference. You can see the range of folks who are listed on here as tenants of this space. Importantly, the zoning code defines retail, and we've got that in a slide here. This is just an example pulled from a source that Justin can explain if you're curious to know. But this list of uses in Murfreesboro within the CH zoning district is supplied by this third-party SafeGraph. People like AutoZone, other retailers, they hire SafeGraph to figure out who's out there now, where are my customers, where are my competitors, so that we can decide, let's go find a piece of property to operate from. This is just a wide range of users that particular company lists that currently operates, almost 600 retailers that includes all these various range of users, automotive parts, accessories, and tire stores. Just happens to be 41 within the CH district in your city. Retail is defined, you've heard that from staff. A retail shop is retail because you're making a sale, there's a point of sale coming out of the four corners, the four walls of that building. That's the whole purpose it's there. if AutoZone certainly has distribution centers. Their largest one is in Lexington, Tennessee. They distribute, and it's the supply chain. And I don't need to tell you all things you learned, probably in junior high. But the supply chain of products has got to get from where they're made to where they're being stored temporarily before they get to the point of sale to the end user, the customer. And that's what this store is. It's nothing more than that. The fact that there's a different ratio of accessible space to the customer versus accessible space to employees only is irrelevant. Your zoning code doesn't define that. Your zoning code doesn't distinguish that. It does, however, do that for a tobacco shop and a vape dispensary retail store. You have that in your list, in your table, as an individual recognized land use category. And what that particular definition says that those products must occupy at least 51% of the sales, gross sales at that store, or occupy 51% of the floor area. So your city council has defined when the ratio of inventory is important in a retail setting, but they've only done it for that particular use and no other. If maybe the text amendment's going to fix that, maybe not. But I see where the staff is trying to go with that. Deliveries are nowhere regulated in your zoning code. We don't regulate deliveries. Certainly with e-commerce, deliveries from Kroger, from other retailers has become a modern age convenience, frankly. People want things delivered to their home. And so there's third parties that are going out to these different retailers, grabbing products, delivering them. That's not what AutoZone does. They don't do that. We've talked about the Western Auto. Let me just give you a couple more examples from the CH Commercial District. And just bring this slide back up. So in your commercial highway district, which is intended for a wide variety of general commercial uses on streets such as Northwest Broad Street, a retail bakery. Step into a bakery store. Now, I'm not in Murfreesboro often, so I can't give you any addresses or particular examples, but I'm just looking at the list of uses in your land use table. You go into a bakery, there's a small area in which you're able to look at the baked goods, but the majority of that square footage in that bakery, I guarantee you, is devoted to baking and supplies and inventory of materials to produce that product. Dry cleaners. Dry cleaners, the product is ours. We deliver our clothes to the dry cleaner. The dry cleaner turns around, has those cleaned. When you walk into that dry cleaner, it's a small space where you're making a transaction. And the inventory of that product, albeit yours, but that service area is not open to the public, to the customer. You can't walk back there. It's not safe. There's things flying around. A catering establishment. I've not seen this before, but your zoning code allows a catering establishment. I've worked with a caterer before, and I have a good idea of how they operate. And you make your point of sale, and you're going to set up an appointment for them and pay for them to come out to a wedding or what have you. The products that they have in that catering establishment, whether it's food or tables or chairs, you're not going to, you're not back there. They have that in back of house. So there's many other examples. Electronics repair shops. You could think about a restaurant, a fast food restaurant. Again, it's a restaurant. But when you order a pizza, even when you go to pick up a pizza, you're in that small little customer space. You're making a transaction. The majority of the activity occurring is not accessible to you. So your zoning code, probably wisely, has not yet tried, except for vape dispensaries, has not yet tried to parse the inside operation of a business except for that one. And that's what staff is trying to do here. They're looking at the AutoZone and they're saying, well, goodness, because the customer can't get back to there, that must be the storage of product. It's inventory. It's temporary. To the extent that it's being stored at all, it's temporary until the inventory is purchased by the customer. That's all it is. It's no different those being baked goods back there being brought out to the customer. The staff report also talks about the gateway design overlay. The gateway design overlay in this instance is not applicable. It cuts across a portion of the property, but more importantly, there's 7 factors by which the gateway design overlay kicks in. And those 7 factors on this slide, excuse me, I'm sorry, this slide 8 goes through those factors. None of those 7 factors are triggered, and the gateway design overlay does not apply. We talked about a potential, the zoning text amendment. I'm glad that was brought up. This is a multi-million-dollar investment by AutoZone. If all they wanted to do was store product here and have de minimis sales, they wouldn't be paying what they're paying to be there. This is a busy street. Retailers want to be on busy streets because that's where they sell their product. A couple of things that was mentioned to you by staff. I'll respond to those, and then I'll stop talking, and maybe you can ask me questions. I'll sit down. The APA Planner's Dictionary I'm very familiar with. I'm a former city planner. Was a city planner for the city of Nashville for 11 years. And I've been practicing land use law for the past too many decades to count now. The Planner's Dictionary is a resource guide for cities, counties to use as they consider adopting definitions. It's not intended for you to grab one of those definitions. In fact, what it is a list of other cities and what definitions they have, and it's from all over the country. It's a good resource for planners to use if they can't find another source. Your zoning code, though, your zoning code refers to the Merriam dictionary, collegiate dictionary. That's your source of trying to find out a defined term. So I just want to be sure you understand the Planner's Dictionary has no role here, because your zoning code says where there's a term that needs to be interpreted, an undefined term, you resort to Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, 11th edition or a newer edition. I don't think we have a term here that needs to be defined, but I just wanted to point that out. The staff has a difficult job in these situations. I was at the Board of Zoning Appeals in Nashville here 2 weeks ago involving a similar interpretation. And I heard Mr. Newman explain all they can do is listen to an applicant, a business, and understand what that business does, how they do it. But from that point, when you take those facts, you have to stay within the 4 corners of your zoning code. You can't go outside that unless you go to Merriam-Webster's dictionary to figure out what a term might mean, because that's what your zoning code says. You've got to stay within the 4 corners. You start with the definitions. There's no definition. The only other definition we have here is the warehouse definition, which is principally storage. There's no definition of distributing. There's no definition of transporting. There's no definition of distribution of auto parts and components. Those phrases and those terms do not exist in your zoning code. In the land use table, there's warehouse, transport, and distribution, but those terms aren't defined except for warehouse, and Mr. Newman covered that. So when you understand what somebody's proposing to do on a piece of property, the difficult task of the staff is, what's the definition if there is one? If there is no definition, what does this thing sound like under the list of activities? When we look at that chart, the land use table, think chart 2, you come down those columns and you try to figure out which of these listed uses does this business most sound like? Which one do they most likely fit? And then you go across the table and see whether or not that particular use is permitted in the zoning district. And this is where we think the staff has erred. They jump down to warehouse distribution, which is not permitted in the CH district. But that's because we believe they've misunderstood exactly how this business operates. And importantly, what you just heard, this location will operate no different than any of the other AutoZone stores in your city. It's the same operation. The fact that there might be a delivery to a customer, your zoning code doesn't address that. And so it's those kinds of concerns are concerns beyond AutoZone. Those kinds of concerns are across the retail spectrum, and your zoning code has not yet addressed that, although I think the text amendment may do that. I think I'm ready to be quiet. let me say one more thing. And just to emphasize, product inventory is not warehouse storage. I can't say that enough. In terms of the leasability of property, I can't speak. I can't speak to whether it's more expensive, less expensive for AutoZone to be here if they want to do a warehouse as opposed to being out in a warehouse zoning district. I can't speak to that. I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, Mr. Chairman, perhaps the public hearing is ripe, and I would like an opportunity to rebut any comments that come either from staff or from the public.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate your time. I've got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Let's say I'm looking for the 73 Carmen Ghia carburetor. Would AutoZone want me to go to one of the locations around town or go to this location? Because while I understand I can buy any part that's in this hub, how would a customer know that this is the place to go for just retail versus wanting me to go to the other locations and then this location can supply those other?
Yeah, I'm going to have Justin answer that question, but I'm on Lowe's website often. And when I go on the Lowe's to order a product, it tells me we don't have it in the store that's by your house, but we do have it in a couple of other stores in the vicinity of Middle Tennessee. I'll let him answer that question.
So I've got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
So I get your point with respects to the certain types of businesses, the square footage differential between like a cleaning store, cleaners or a bakery. I get that. I think, where what I'm hearing staff say is, that's a component of this, but more so, you would label, if it truly is a warehouse or a distribution center, then that's what's not allowed in the commercial highway zoning area. So are you saying that there is no transfer of product from this location to other AutoZone locations, whether in Murfreesboro or in Middle Tennessee?
I'll have to have Justin answer that question, but the point that I'm trying to make is, if someone is proposing to build a warehouse, a critical question of that warehouse developer is, are you going to be selling products on site? Are your customers coming to that warehouse and transacting a business, conducting a business transaction, paying money for whatever's at the warehouse? If it is, then, and retail we heard is permitted in a warehouse, then that is sort of a combination of, I guess, of the two. This particular store, everything in the store is available for sale. It's there for sale, and the sale transaction occurs inside that store. That's not what warehouses do. That's not what distribution facilities do.
I agree with you. I'd like my question answered.
Yes, sir. Let me get the authority.
I have a more legal question, while you're here. How do you distinguish between what your definition of what this storefront is? How is that distinguished from the position of the city that most AutoZones in this community are a retail with an accessory structure or use of warehouse, and this is a warehouse with the accessory structure of use of retail? How do you what is your response?
Yes.
To that?
So,
because that's a definition that's inside of our zone, and we do have, even though other places may consider this retail, we do have other options in our zoning, and we have to fit into our zoning. So how is this not? How do you respond to their comment that there's no way that this is an accessory use of storage, unlike in a normal AutoZone, a regular sized AutoZone, we would consider it retail with an accessory use of warehouse.
So what the staff is referring to is where you have a business, and I can't think of one offhand, but there's a business, and they've got contractor supply. Okay, let's use that one. And I forgot to mention that because a contractor's supply, and I wrote it down and I can't find it here, is permitted in the CH zoning district. Indoor contractors' products. you can have that in a CH district. And as a contractor coming and going with whatever kind of equipment material that they use. What the staff's looking at is when you come down the table, you'll see that warehousing is permitted anywhere that the use is permitted, in this case, the retail use. And Mr. Blomley did a good job of describing that warehouse is permitted if incidental and accessory to the principal use, retail sales. But then then they go further into the definition of a warehouse, and it's got to be those terms have to apply, and I don't have the definition. Actually, ancillary and subordinate to the principal use in area, extent, and purpose. So the question is, what's the purpose? I mean, frankly, this has been made far more complicated than it should be. What's the purpose of the business? Why are they there? What's the principal use of that property? It's to sell their parts. Their parts are on site. There's also parts off site that would come eventually to replenish the parts that have been sold. That kind of distribution, that's the normal chain, that's the normal supply chain.
Well, I guess that it's confusing because you may not have expressed that as clearly when you initially initiated this application.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. But in my letter, I said we'll put on more proof as we get in front of you and understand better what the staff has to say about all this. So trying to suggest that just because people can't walk back to see all of that for sale inventory means that all of that space is somehow a warehouse, but it doesn't qualify as a warehouse because it's larger than the area in which the people are standing to transact their purchase. It's a tangled interpretation, really getting wrapped around the axle on all of that. If you just back up and think about what you all do when you go to make purchases, retail purchases, and I listed those examples, it's very little different than all of these other examples. And there's two issues I think the staff's really focusing on here. Number one is deliveries, and then number two is the size of the inventory, the amount of inventory. But to answer your question, this rough proportion of inventory to the customer shoppable area, it's the same in all the stores. It's just this is bigger. And that's no different than any big box retailer that you go into. Best Buy used to be smaller. Well, I mean, now they're a big box. And there's a lot of big box retailers that have a lot of inventory. They don't, some of them, I heard the reference to whether Home Depot lets you come up and down the halls all the time. No, they don't. I go in there and they've got an aisle blocked off because they're moving inventory. And you can't get in there because it's dangerous. So at the moment they block it off and they're taking inventory down because somebody's purchased it and it's got to be moved out to the front for someone to pick it up, the customer to pick it up. At the moment, well, that aisle must be a warehouse. That aisle must be storage. Wrong. That aisle is inventory and it's being sold. And the moment the customer is prevented from getting in there, does that turn it magically into a temporary warehouse? No, it doesn't. And so this stuff is not being stored for periods of time for distribution somewhere else. This inventory is being stored temporarily until the customer comes in and buys it. That's very little different than the Home Depot or any other big box.
But didn't your emails to city say that it would be distributed to other stores?
I didn't hear the question. Sorry.
Did the emails to the city, the previous emails to the city, the applicant has had in conversations with the city, did they not admit that they would be distributing to other retail stores?
I'm going to have them answer that. I'm going to have my client answer that. Yeah, that was before I got involved.
Okay.
So I'd like for them to answer that. But yeah, Justin, please.
I can answer the first question from Mr. Halliburton and Chair Young because they're similar answers, if you will. I mean, there was a very direct question of will this distribute parts to other stores? That's a very simple answer, which is no. But to answer
But
Chair.
you previously said that it would.
So, yeah, and so and look, on Mr. Pecord's behalf, he's worked at AutoZone for 42 years, the world's foremost expert on designing AutoZone stores. In this particular instance, his communication was incorrect. And look, that could be confusing, totally get that, and that is our fault.
But I believe the city based their decision on that. Has there been any communication saying, how have you?
There were.
That's very confusing, because how do we trust that you're telling us the correct answer now?
Absolutely, and there were follow-up emails in that same chain that were printed out from our staff correcting that piece, and that's when we heard the reference to a non-routed hub, if you will, which is this instance. We did come back and correct that communication. It should be in the packet somewhere, but we have some of those printed emails from that communication chain as well. So that initial correspondence was incorrect. We came back and tried to correct that in further correspondence, and that's one of the reasons why we're here today, is to make sure that we set the record straight.
I think the key word in one of the emails says, will not routinely deliver parts to surrounding AutoZone stores.
Or not yet?
You may mention that delivery on a regular cadence. If I go to a satellite, I'm assuming this is the hub, and I'm going to a satellite store and want the obscure carburetor, this store is going to furnish it. It's going to deliver it out there to that store, and then I pick it up at my local.
Well, there's a couple, and I guess that gets back to your question that you asked of if you're looking for a specific part, how do you get that, right? So we want you to do one of two things. We want you to go to the closest store to you and see if they have it, right? Or we want you to look at your app and see if that particular store has it in stock. If they don't, they can look at the inventory with the surrounding stores, and they can tell you to either go visit one of those stores, or you can do a buy here, pick up there, if you will, which is similar to every other AutoZone store, every O'Reilly, every Advance does the exact same thing. If I go here and I don't have it, but my sister store does, you can pay for it here and pick it up there. They can hold it for you there. You can go get it.
I assume you'd offer I'll have it at the store for you tomorrow or this afternoon.
Sure, yeah, it's that kind of transaction, if you will.
To me, that gets to the warehouse piece of it. If you're going to warehouse the more obscure parts at a central location, you're not directing all customers to that spot. It's more of the warehousing component than the retail. I understand you can go in and buy it there. It's available. It's easier on everybody. I come in right now and buy it. But if I go to one of these others, hey, I can have it here for you. Yes, another option is for you to drive downtown, but as this hub and spoke model expands, it's probably easier for me to just come back to the store tomorrow to get it. Then this store would be supplying those potentially. Maybe that's not what you're calling it, but it's going to house the more obscure parts, or else you think AutoZone would think it's feasible to have all these parts at the local store. If there are enough of them coming out there, they would stock it locally. But to expand the parts base, they're going to be in a central area, and it will supply these other. It's kind of how I see it. Again, granted, I can walk up and buy it, and that's the easiest for everybody. But in the event that this local store doesn't have it, it's going to refer back to the nearest place where it does have it, which seems to be this location.
It could be this location, or it could be the other surrounding stores. The retail game is it's a dollars per square foot game, and it's a being able to say yes to the customer game. So that's why we have two different formats, because we put the fastest turning SKUs in the smaller store, the slower turning SKUs in the bigger store. But that does not mean that there is a specific set of inventory in that big box that is just there for warehousing or distribution. It's everything in every AutoZone store can be bought from coming straight in the front door, walk out with it immediately. That's our position, and that's the way that we operate.
There's a lot of email trails in here, but so back to February 26th, it said this store is expected to service 20 stores in the area, which are currently served by Mega Hub in Nolensville. That's changed?
That is, and that was never the original intention.
But that's what it said.
You're exactly right.
So you're kind of shifting things around. I can see how this staff has maybe got some, concerns, because as we've heard from you today, it's not what they were hearing before.
And agree, and I apologize for that miscommunication in the beginning. If we wouldn't have communicated that on the front end, we might not be here today. The surrounding stores are going to be serviced from the Nolensville Pike location because that's the store that does routed deliveries, if you will. I mean, that's the model. This store will not service any other AutoZone stores. It's a retail store, and that's our position. The miscommunication was unfortunate, and that's our fault.
So do you currently shuttle parts between small stores within our location, within our community?
No, not typically. I mean, it's typically if you go into this store and they don't have it, but the sister store down the street does, you can do a buy here, pick up there type of transaction. But
I'll
that's
still
the
have
same.
to go to the sister store.
You should still have to go to the sister store. Yeah, I mean that's the same in every
Do you anticipate
store.
with these hubs that there would be more of a shuttle service so that you would move those products to a different store? Like, I mean, I can buy, I can go to Gap, and if they don't have that product at my Gap, then they'll shuttle it from Lebanon or wherever to me. You guys don't do that in your retail stores.
The Nolensville location will do that, absolutely. So, and I mean, I just was handed an email here on, February 27th, which was a clarification from Mr. Pecord to Brad Barbie. And it just says, I have further clarification regarding the store operation. This store will not have routed deliveries since that will be handled by the store on Nolensville Pike in Nashville. Instead, all products in this store are to be sold at the checkout counter for DIY customers and by commercial customers at the commercial counter in the front of the store, which is what you see here highlighted in orange. I mean, so we attempted to come back and correct that back in February, but obviously the initial miscommunication was unfortunate.
But you still directed the staff to go to Nolensville and saying that that's a store that's similar to what we'd be.
We did because it is similar in size and similar in floor plan. The difference is the hub operations center and the hub staff and the delivery vans. That's the difference.
And you don't have any other stores like this in the United States?
Any other stores, big stores that don't do distribution?
Do you have any other large store that does not have a routed delivery?
Absolutely. We have 2 of those in Memphis. We have roughly 30-ish of those around the country at this point.
Okay.
Because if you think about it from a distribution standpoint, I mean, if I'm delivering to my sister stores 2 or 3 times a day, I can go out about an hour, right? But the more of these big boxes you need, you don't need to do that everywhere because it's not efficient, if you will. So these we need to be able to say yes to the customer from a retail perspective. And that's what we do in this particular store and with the other stores that don't have routes as well. We have 2 of those in Memphis. That are 30,000 square feet, and they do not run routes.
And who are you serving from the commercial aspect? What kind of?
Sure, and that's a great question. So if you go to any auto repair shop, if you go to a Firestone and they're doing a brake job, right, they don't have their own inventory. What they do is they pick up the phone and they call in Advance and AutoZone and O'Reilly's and Napa, say, I need this. If you have a commercial account with us, we say that's great. We ring it up for you there. We put it in a little truck and take it straight from the store to the repair shop. They put it on the vehicle. That's done in all 4 existing AutoZone locations in Murfreesboro that are all 4 zoned CH. It's also done in the Advances in the O'Reillys in Murfreesboro as well. There's 2 Advances and 2 O'Reillys also on Broad Street that also do the same exact thing.
So an AutoZone employee is who provides the transportation of the product to the local
That is correct.
mechanic.
That is correct. They drive it straight over to the repair shop and they put it on the vehicle there. That's not unique to this location. 95% of our chain does that across the country.
And the large big box AutoZones and other spaces, what percentage of sales are commercial versus walk-in?
I mean, as a company, we're kind of 70-30, and that was the projection for this particular box as well. I mean, those stores do very well in the commercial side of things because you can say yes to the customer more often. But we are, by and large, a DIY-focused company. I mean, we're 70-30 as a split as a company as a whole.
70
these
walk-in.
boxes tend to do the same thing. I'm sorry
to interrupt you. 70% walk-in customers, 30% to delivery.
That is correct. That is correct.
Excuse me.
That is correct.
Okay. I guess in our agenda materials, there was, and I'm not sure who originated, there was a lot of talk of the hub and spoke,
Yeah.
which now you're saying is not applicable, but it seemed like a pretty widespread model, and hey, this is how we're doing it. Now you're saying this, I'm having a hard time working through that. You're saying just miscommunication of the purpose of the store, but I'm
Sure, and
getting hung on that part.
And I totally understand how that can be confusing, and it's so, for us, that mega hub definition primarily refers to the inventory, assortment, and the size of the box. We've got a couple hundred of these around the country as a whole, but not all of them run your routed deliveries to replenish the surrounding stores. You have two of those in Nashville, the one on Nolensville Pike, and then there's another one on the north side of Nashville. Those two run routes to service basically all of Middle Tennessee. We've got 8 stores that run routes in all of Tennessee to support the surrounding stores. There's 2 in Memphis, 1 in Jackson, 2 in Nashville, Chattanooga, Johnson City, Knoxville. And that pretty much covers all of our stores in the state of Tennessee within about an hour and a half delivery radius. So beyond that, I mean, it just, frankly, it's not efficient to run routes to those stores, which is why we're not going to do it in this location. And it's, I mean, it is very, very much cheaper if we were to go just build a warehouse and an industrial park to use for distribution. That's just not what we do. I mean, we do that with our distribution centers, but those are 500,000 square foot facilities. We have 12 of those around the country, 1 in Mexico, 1 in Brazil. And that's our primary distribution model, if you will. But we've only got 8 of those boxes that serve the whole state of Tennessee. One of the big ones is in Lexington. I'm sorry, sir.
Well, I'm sorry. This has been going on maybe 6 months or so, whatever. But it feels like to me that there needs to be some kind of restatement, some memorandum, because I'm hearing you say one thing and I'm seeing something else. And perhaps there needs to be a restatement of formally what you are and what you're not. For our staff and for this board to have, you know, a fair and clear understanding of what you say and what you put in, you know, what you put on paper. This is what you are.
Sure.
And I agree with that. I know we haven't even got to the public hearing process here, but I have a feeling we're going to hear the kind of the same comments. And what I'm about to say is probably not fair. But I understand why staff, I'll be honest with you, staff chose to deny this because you've got 2 stories going on here. It seems to me that if somehow you could reapply based upon and paint the picture correctly, that, and I can't speak for staff, that maybe we can work this out. But based upon the information that they have today, you know, I can't. I would have to agree with them. Just because we're switching stories midstream. If my son did that to me, I wouldn't believe him. I'm just telling you.
I've got a teenager myself, Mr.
Yeah.
Albert, and I promise you I agree. And look, and again, the miscommunication in the beginning was absolutely unfortunate. We tried to come back and correct that, but obviously here's where we are now.
Yeah.
We're looking for a path forward as well. We want to do the same thing.
I don't know if it's, well, I
We'll go
try to
through.
use a little common sense here. Is there not an appropriate way to handle this besides if we uphold your decision? Do they not have the ability or right to come back and apply for another permit? I don't know if that's the appropriate time to talk about it.
Mr. Halliburton, at this time, I think the opportunity is going to be the current decision for staff and where we are now with the use that it is because of the floor area. It's the layout, it's the amount of retail space versus racking or what we consider warehouse or distribution space. So I think we're still may be here at this point because we really don't have a grounds to go outside of our current ordinance and how we got to this decision.
I may have this may be a stupid question, but is there any way that this would be considered wholesale? Or is that?
Yeah.
I think Mr. Henry's made some very good comments with respect to what they say they are. It's just that, again, this is, don't take offense, but I'm just saying what you say now and what was in the corporate report and what the email trails were, there's been some inconsistency here. So which is it? And if it, because I can, to the point of saying this is retail, I can agree with some of that to a degree. But when you start talking about, well, we're not going to do this, we're not going to, even though we said we were going to do this other, we said we were going to be a mega hub. Now we're saying no, we're not. That's where I have a problem. So we all have a vote. And
Yeah, that's certainly making it tricky.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would think if we could clear up where we are now, and then we don't mind continuing to working with the applicant to see where we are, how we move forward. But I don't know that we can move forward and create something now without having conditional approvals and things like that. To Mr. Tibbs' point, is the concern is it's a retail space with restaurants around it, and if any of these things were to start happening, we have no way of managing those opportunities. And we're right where we are with Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, where now they're having outdoor storage that wasn't approved or allowed in those areas. And now the fire marshal's working with those guys because of the unsafe parking lots and things like that. So if we could, at this point, make the decision that's at hand right now, we don't mind continuing to work with AutoZone to see where we move from here. But I would just hate to have this lingering out. And now at this point, it's where staff is now having to determine where our zoning ordinance actually is and why we made this decision, and then how do we work around it. And I don't know that that's the best place to be. But we don't mind continuing to work through after this decision.
My last question would be, is this because of the other actions we've had to defer? Is this another one of those, or is this
There's
unrelated?
Posted.
Yeah.
This was on last month's agenda. We put out signs for last month. Mr. Newman was able to verify that sign is still in place. So we have met all three public notice criteria that we have. They had a mail-in.
So this is, we can make a decision on this today?
Yes, sir.
There was a
All right.
sign there for this. And I assume for clarification, if there needs to be additional work, we would probably need to rule on this appeal and then go from there. Okay, any further questions from the AutoZone people? Appreciate your time and patience with us and answering questions. At this time, we'll hold the public hearing. Is there anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? If you come forward and provide any comments, and name and address, please.
I'm going to run your slides.
Oh, okay. My name is Caroline Cook. I am here on behalf of the landlord. Do you need my home address?
Please.
Okay, 5211 Kentucky Avenue, Nashville, Tennessee. So I have been doing all of our leasing for about 6.5 years at Cook Properties. My grandparents bought this shopping center in 1997, so 27 years ago. We've managed it, leased it, done everything the whole time. As long as we've owned it and known about it, it's been multi-tenant use. I've been told at one point that there was a national grocery store in there. So a couple of things about the shopping center in particular, the area that AutoZone is proposing. If you're familiar with Jackson Heights, part of it is 2 levels and this one is just 1. So one thing that we're excited about this location for them is that this is one of the areas that's all 1 level. There are docks. I think 18-wheelers and deliveries have been a potential point of conversation, and that shouldn't be a problem. 18-wheelers can easily get back behind the shopping center. Actually, at a lot of our other former tenants, Badcock, Legacy Furniture, people have had to take deliveries in the front, and it's not ideal for us, but it's always been fine. Many times I've been there and seen 18-wheelers parked out front, delivering through the front doors. And in this case, we're excited that the location, they can be in the back, deliver, not interrupt parking, other tenants, anything like that, which is great. On top of that, We've had some former tenants in there that, as some people have mentioned, we do feel like have been fairly similar. Goodyear, that's a 7,300 square foot building. I was not doing our leasing when Goodyear was there, but Reox moved in after them. They did auto parts service and sales in there. I would say this is just a guess, but the building was kind of 3 separate parts, and probably a third of that or more was dedicated to parts and inventory in the back, as well as some tires and stuff in the front retail area, as well as North Star kitchen cabinets, another good example. I believe AutoZone would be occupying part of that space. It was around the back of the shopping center, also where the dock area is. And again, I never went in as a customer, but as a leasing agent, I went in several times and just to talk to the tenants. And the majority of their inventory also was in the back in a warehouse section or in drawers hidden from customers, that sort of thing. So I could go through a list of a couple other tenants, but I know we've all been here for a while, so I'm ready to go home. I'm sure everyone else is too. But yeah, happy to answer any questions that I can. We definitely would love for AutoZone to go in. We feel like it would benefit not just AutoZone, but a lot of the other tenants as well for traffic in the shopping center. So that's where we stand.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this application? Sure.
May I just make
Sure.
a couple of final points here. Your zoning code has no maximum size for a big box retailer. There is no maximum size. There's no ratio of the sales floor to the product inventory area. Zoning code is silent on that for retail. The only exception is a vape and tobacco dispensary. There's no limitations in your zoning code on deliveries. That's not addressed at all. In this case, the principal use of this building by AutoZone is the sale of every product within the store. So we submit that the decision is an error in finding that AutoZone, in this instance, is a warehouse. We submit that it is retail. That's the sole purpose that they are there. That's their principal purpose of being there, is to sell product, not to warehouse product. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, we'll close the public hearing and open the floor for further discussion. I'll let you start. I will want to give everybody a chance to state their case and answer questions, and I guess provide us as much info. Out of kind of uncharted territory, so it'll help you guide us on what's the best way to get everybody's questions and thoughts answered.
I mean, my whole issue is portrayed one way, and then we come in and we portray it a different way in the end. If I was in Mr. Newman's position, based upon what I was told up front, then I was told something different in the end, it would be a difficult decision or play for me. I wish there would be a way to get this worked out, honestly. I think this would be a positive for this shopping center, without any question. But at the same time, I understand the decision that the planning director made.
Can we have a condition of approval that there would be no distribution occurring in this building?
I think that's something that the board can discuss, and if you like, I can read part of the rule on appeals of administrative determinations, and that might help.
That would be
frame
very
some
helpful.
of what your deliberations would be. So looking at section 12, C, subsection 3, just to get straight to the decision part, and I'll read again the whole paragraph here. Prior to the adjournment of the meeting at which such hearing on such notice of appeal is concluded, which is here, The BZA may affirm, reverse, or modify the order, requirement, decision, or determination appealed from, and in so doing, the BZA may issue an order, impose a requirement, or render a decision or determination which it deems appropriate, and to that end, the BZA shall be deemed to have the same powers as the office, department, or bureau whose action was the subject of the appeal. The BZA may take the appeal under advisement or defer the decision until the next regular meeting of the BZA. So I think the key there with imposing a condition upon the determination would be, would Mr. Newman, as the planning director, have that power in the initial instance to add that condition? And that might be something that Mr. Newman could speak to, whether or not he, in the first case, would have that power.
Chair, if I may.
Sure.
We've been discussing this a little over here. You know, we would be willing to continue to work with AutoZone if this body wanted to have some sort of conditional approval. I think that this body could defer action, allow us to work with AutoZone to address the distribution opportunities that are out there and see if we can come back with something that we can agree on for having a conditional approval.
We would need to move to defer in that instance until such time as the city asks to come back, or do we defer to a certain amount of time?
The rule says defer to the next regular meeting. So I think if there is a deferral, it will be to just the next meeting.
We're just going to have a party again next month, huh?
I guess the AutoZone needs to agree to that.
Yes, sir. That would be acceptable. My client would like to really drill down on what the issue is, which we haven't heard here today, you know, regarding distribution, vans, trucks, circulation, that kind of site action is something that I think our client would certainly want to talk with the staff and see if we can't work out what really is the pinch point about the concern here. So yes, sir, deferral is acceptable.
And we'll work on some definitions so that we're both having a meeting of the minds and can understand what we're talking about when we talk about what distribution is and those types of things. And we can work on site plans. We're very skilled at that. We work with people all the time on it.
Last comment, promise. I would like to see clarification in writing of what exactly they're doing, as opposed to what has all transpired in this conversation, plus all the emails.
Sir, that will be updated. Yes, sir.
Great. Well, I move to defer until next month.
I'll second it. And I appreciate everybody
Sure.
trying to work this out.
Sure. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, will you call the roll for us?
Ms. King?
Aye.
Mr. Tips?
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton?
Aye.
Chair Young?
Aye. Appreciate everybody's time.
And Chair Young, if I could just
Yes.
put a bow on the first item that was discussed today and was actually voted on once it came forward that the signs had not been put out. As I understand it right now, that decision of the board stands because there's been no motion to reconsider that rejection. So I put that out there maybe as a rhetorical question of whether or not the board was intending to reconsider that one, or if it was the board's will that first application, that the decision stand on that.
Mr. Tips, you asked whether we'd heard anything from the first go-around at that location, and one person inquired with Mr. Aguilera just for clarification.
Right.
It wasn't, I don't know whether that's reasonable to take inference that there wouldn't be much attention to a change. I don't know whether that's taking care of the neighbors enough or not.
I personally am satisfied with the motion, the approval, or I should say the motion to deny the application, so.
It was an approval and the neighbors wanted to do something different. I guess
Right, that's what, yeah.
wanted to challenge it, and because of notice, I guess you could have the
I mean, I
right.
think that if somebody chose to reject it and wanted us to have another hearing, I don't know that our decision would be changed. So I'd say I'm for sticking with it.
Okay.
I agree with that as well.
Then like I said, the decision now stands upon the record. And
Okay.
Right.
All right. Anything else?
Move adjourn.
Everyone's left.
All right, well, we will adjourn.
Aye.